Okay, we're starting up here. I want to make sure my fellow commissioners that are online can hear us. If you can, nod your heads, please.
Yes.
Steve can hear us. Hey, that was a good sign. Okay, Steve's
Hear
in.
us.
It's Tuesday, January 30th. This is the Board of County Commissioners work session. And up first today, we have a joint meeting with the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. I want to say welcome to all of you. It's been a long time, and we're really glad you all came in, and this is going to be great. So I really appreciate you coming. We've got about 15 minutes for this, and that won't be enough, but I promise we'll do more. So I'm going to hand it off to Lisa and Lisa.
Great.
Or the chair.
Or the chair.
Oh,
think the
should I go to the,
chair.
I
Yeah.
want to go to you first?
Yes, please.
Are you the chair?
I am the chair.
Shows how
Thank
much I know.
you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Wendy.
Thank you. I would hereby call this meeting of the Healthy Rivers Board to order and just make some remarks before we hear our brief presentation on the recap of our program and projects. I want to thank the Pitkin County Board of County Commissioners for the trust that you have placed in us, the Healthy Rivers Advisory Board, to advise you on matters that are related to expenditures and administration of the Healthy Rivers and Streams Fund, which was created, as you recall, by a ballot referendum in 2008. I'm the Reverend Wendy Huber, the chair of the advisory board, a resident of Garfield County, a son who lives in Eagle County, and an employee in Pitkin County as the priest of St. Peter's of the Valley Episcopal Church in the Pitkin County part of Basalt. I'm in my second term on the board and now begin my second year as chair. As many of you who are or have been parents, and we just heard about such a parent, we know that when our children become teenagers, things often change in the household. And the Healthy Rivers and Stream Fund Advisory Board is also now a teenager. And inherent in that, we are maturing as a board and need your advice and counsel. Teenagers, as we are, begin to
Needs to be
inquire.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I apologize.
What do you need?
We need to promote Kelly so she can, but is she actually, you're here now. Okay, sorry.
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
I was just
I just
talking
want to
about
make sure we're all here.
That's
Yeah.
all right.
That's good.
Teenagers begin to inquire as a board about all manner of things. What is my purpose? What am I supposed to do? And why are we doing the things we are doing this way? Our teenage board is in the same place, and we will, in the coming months, revisit our founding documents from the ballot in which we were created to the bylaws that govern us today. We hope that one or more of you as commissioners will join us on this journey as we move from the teenage years into our adulthood. Matt will share some of our activities, and of course, we have our 10th anniversary report that outlines just how important these funds have been to ensure water quality and quantity in our watershed. And we have so much to be thankful for and proud of, and now we can move into the future with better clarity on the expectations of this board and ensuring that we are, in fact, discharging our duties as your advisory board. Thank you again for the privilege that you've given each one of us as citizen volunteer board members of your advisory board. Again, now I turn it over to staff who have asked our communications person to put together a video on a recap of the program and then some joint topics we'll discuss together.
Great.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
That's a bigger one.
Yep. Let's try this again. All right.
In 2008, Pitkin County voters authorized a 0.1% sales tax dedicated.
Not sure how to do this.
The Pitkin County Healthy Rivers program was born, the first of its kind in
Drag the little blue
Colorado.
thing.
next to the
We're
36.
just very aware that, you have to safeguard your assets, and that's what this was all about. Pickens County is the largest contributor to the Colorado River before it hits the Gunnison. Our watershed as a whole, both the Roaring Fork and the Frying Pan, are about 38-39% diverted currently, and there are existing water rights out there to take another 20% of our flows. We're really in the bullseye. What would it be like in our valley to say we no longer have gold medal waters because the water temperatures are too high, because of climate change, and because of the dewatering? These are the issues that we need to be prepared to fight.
The Volunteer River Board convened in 2009. By 2010, the pioneering program was swimming in the deep end.
The biggest success is creating for Pickens County a strong voice for the citizens in the county in this world of water.
A seat at the water table, our most valuable asset when the fate of our rivers is on the agenda. It has helped us find unique ways to protect river flows, defend our watershed from outside interests, improve wildlife habitat, create recreational opportunities, and enhance river infrastructure. We have celebrated many gains, yet our rivers need a voice today more than ever.
The problems in the Colorado River now as a whole are coming home to roost.
Drought.
There's no new molecules of water.
And overdevelopment and overdependence is really going to change the way things look.
Consider the plight of the Crystal River, whose free-flowing future has never been less certain. Whether from east or west, dam or diversion, the next evolution of river grab will likely be forced upon the Crystal Valley, either by outside interests backed by billions or a new age of federally decreed dam building. We stand steadfast in support of federal wild and scenic designation of the Crystal, the only tool with the teeth to protect the river from top-level predators. Protective measures are only part of the picture. Supporting the natural pillars of river resilience has never been more important, like the beaver, who has regained a foothold since their populations were wiped out over a century ago. We are a big beaver believer in the keystone species' ability to assist with our most pressing river health and water issues. It's time they thrive in a suitable habitat throughout our region. We're working in partnership to make that a reality. Partnership is a huge part of our work. Our grants program has funded over 50 partner projects. We team up on infrastructure projects, support restoration efforts, fund research, work with private landowners, lead advocacy efforts and legal battles, support river and watershed education programs, and collaborate with nearly a dozen river health work groups. It takes a watershed to raise a river.
Hopefully we planted a seed.
You've got to have hope.
There's no knowing going into some things what'll develop. You have to do what you can identify as the right thing, and good things will come from it.
Learn more at PitkinCountyRivers.com.
Thank you for that. The people online couldn't hear it, so we'll have to send them a link. If you're posted yet, you can send them a link so they can catch up on that. Nice job. I assume Chris was the narrator?
That's
Were
as
you
quiet
improvising?
as I've ever heard from you before, just for the record.
That was the most brief he's ever been.
Well, I think I can keep rolling with that. That video gave you a quick glimpse of kind of the many projects that we've been working on. And as you know, there's a lot more work to do and a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So we wanted to, highlight a few things that we've done in 2023 for you all. And actually, since 2010, the Healthy Rivers program has funded 56 grants totaling over $1.1 million, including 6 grants and 2 sponsorships in 2023. We recently improved our grant application process that the board just heard a couple weeks ago, and are deploying it for this spring 2024 cycle. We funded several large partner projects outside of our regular grant process, such as the Crystal River Restoration Project in Carbondale that we're partnering with the town of Carbondale, and the Sam Cadell State Wildlife Area Boat Ramp that we're going to partner with CPW this summer on. We're working on our beaver inventory that we funded last year. Clay Ramey just came to the River Board last month, and we plan to have him come and report to the BoCC probably in February sometime, because that was a fun, exciting to hear about the results of that inventory. And of course, the ongoing advocacy of the wild and scenic designation for the Crystal River that you'll hear about later on in the meeting. We also have the 2 capital in-house projects going on. The new boat ramp at Fisherman's Park was installed in 2023. It was a huge hit. We've heard from anglers up and down the valley how much they appreciate it and how great it works. Additionally, we're working on some our final design work for the streamside amenities at the Whitewater Park, and we should have more to share on that soon. We continue to fund several education programs, including grants to the Roaring Fork Conservancy, sponsorship of the Sustaining Colorado Watershed Conference over in Avon, and we are funding the new education at the Marble Charter School, and of course our very own Beaver campaign that we're ramping up, and we also do a scholarship fund with the Aspen High School, Basalt High School, and a high school in the Roaring Fork watershed. We'll have a much bigger presence this year on local TV and radio. Watch for us. We're going to do some spots up on the mountain on the local TV program. And you'll also hear messaging from us on 6 different local radio stations this year. We've added, I think we're on 3, APR, KD&K, and KMTS, and we're adding the Mountain series as well. So, yeah, that kind of, I wanted to say on top of all of that, staff and board members have attended a total of 16 different river health-related conferences, summits, and trainings in 22. And we also participate in ongoing efforts with 10 different collaborative working groups. And I wanted to mention those just in case the BoCC wasn't aware that we are involved with quite a few of these other groups, including the Roaring Fork Wildfire Collaborative, the Watershed, the newly formed Watershed Collaborative, the Colorado Basin Roundtable, the Crystal River Wild and Scenic. There's several different groups. There's a core group, there's a collaboration, there's a coalition, and there's a stakeholder process group. The Colorado Water Congress State of Affairs Committee. There is a local beaver group that includes CPW, the Forest Service, the BLM, the Conservancy, the Sierra Club, EcoFlight, the Roaring Fork Biodiversity Initiative, and the National Forest Foundation, amongst several others. We are on the actual National Wild and Scenic Coalition. We attend those Zooms. We participate in Riverscape Restoration Network meetings with American Rivers, and we're in a smaller beaver working group for the state of Colorado. So that just names a few of the collaborative efforts we're involved with as well.
Wow, thank you. So what have you done lately? Right? This is really great to see you ramping it up, and I can sense the enthusiasm and the optimism for everything going forward. This is great. That's all the time we've been given, but I don't want to
No, that's kind of what we planned, and then
that's all. Okay.
We're going to have Kurt join us.
We're gonna get our presentation on Lincoln Creek. Sure, Francie, go ahead.
So what is happening at the Sam Cadell project? What's the plan there?
We just started the engineering process for the in-channel work down there at the boat ramp with CPW. They're doing the upstream, and we're doing the in-river work. And
what's going to be the result of that work?
An improved boat ramp. They recently, well, I think a few years ago now, have purchased property from Rick Neely upstream, and they're looking to improve all of the safety issues out there. You know, as you know, it's crazy busy. So they're looking to install a new ramp system, and we're going to do the improvements of the river.
That's great.
Like what? How do you improve the river there? That's what I mean. What is it? What does that mean?
Well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, it's related to the boat ramp. So our
You're
engineers
going to make
will,
it so the boat can actually launch and not roll
yeah,
against rocks
make
the
it.
whole way or
Yes,
something?
that is.
Well,
That's
that is a goal.
it's a huge goal. We'll see how that unfolds exactly. And yeah, so I mean, River Restoration's working on that. They're also bringing in some folks who will do some sort of they'll pay attention to what kind of plantings that might have to happen. There's actually quite a bit of native vegetation that's going to be taken out, which is too bad, but that's just what's going to happen. And so I think, yeah, so River Restoration's working with those folks just to sort of make sure that our impacts aren't too bad or could be better after the engineers have been through there.
Okay.
I think another main issue is that the way the boat ramp is situated right now, they have to keep bringing in gravel, and the gravel gets swept away downriver. So we're going to try to reduce that gravel load on the river.
Nice. I just want to make sure our online board members can you hear us, Steve and Kelly? You can nod, or yes, they can. Okay, great. And we assume we can hear you too if you want to
And then
raise your hand.
another question I had was, what are the scholarship programs? How do they work?
We give a sheet to, they have to answer a question. Andre was one of the original board members that developed a question that we submit to the high schools, and they have to.
Who's they?
These
The
are
high school
students.
high
The
school
applicants.
students who
Okay.
are headed for college, and they generally submit a resume as well as a short essay related to generally water, and we hope that they're going to study something related to water. Sometimes it's a bit of a stretch, but we have a subcommittee that looks at the scholarship applications, makes recommendations, and selects those
What kind of,
applicants.
how much of a scholarship is
They're
it?
actually pretty good.
They're 5,000 each.
Yeah.
And it's Aspen, Basalt, Roaring Fork, and Glenwood Springs are eligible. Automatically, one scholarship goes to Aspen and Basalt, and then the third goes to either a student at Glenwood or Roaring Fork.
And the shocking part is sometimes we don't have very many
Of applicants.
applicants, and it's a wonderful scholarship program.
That's really
I
nice.
didn't
Yeah.
know about that. Thank you for that.
Yep.
It is. I think the Roaring Fork, the watershed also includes, I think, the Yampa School. It's not just those two.
Thanks for that. It's great to see scholarships that actually have a significant amount associated
Yeah.
because as I'm discovering, the cost of education has gone up dramatically, and it's a scholarship of that amount actually makes a difference, and so that's great. So fantastic. I'm going to get us moving. Kurt Dahl's joined us regarding the Lincoln Creek presentation discussion for both boards, and Laura Maker's here. And our Healthy Rivers crew is here. This is going to be interesting and important discussion.
And we're going to play musical chairs so that you
Fine,
can
move
hear
around.
us.
Do what you have to do. And Kurt, we can get you online. Make sure that the video and audio is working for you before we dive in.
And I need to. Hello.
Hey.
Hi, Kurt.
Afternoon. Let me share my screen really quick. I think there it is.
Hey, Rosa, can you tell if we have other people online? I'm just wondering if anybody else is listening or watching or. Where do you see that? I don't even see that. Oh, there they are. Yeah, got it.
Do we need to promote any of them?
I'm not certain. It's up to you. Did you talk to Ken Newbecker? I see he's on. Do you want to?
It's entirely up to you guys.
I'm gonna let's promote Ken Newbecker because I think we talked about it before, and then I think if Karen Teague joins, we can promote her as well. Thank you. But they don't have to talk if they don't want to. Okay. Kurt, I think we're ready for you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon. Kurt Dahl, an Environmental Health Manager for Pitkin County. I'm here today to talk a little bit about Lincoln Creek and an update on project going on there. Lisa and I have both been to the Healthy Rivers Board, October of 2022. Just to give a quick update to the board, but I believe the commissioners we have not done this presentation to. So I'm going to start out with a little bit of background, just so that we're all on the same page. So in 2021, there was a fish kill in Grizzly Reservoir that was reported to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. They went up and investigated, found that actually there was a fish kill, and in looking at Grizzly Reservoir had some concerns about the water quality. It was the reservoir itself looked a little turquoise in color, which can be indicative of heavy metals contamination. And so based on that, they engaged Colorado Parks and CDPHE, and then the State Division of Reclamation and Mining Safety. As I think probably most of us are familiar, Lincoln Creek itself has had degradation associated with it. We've seen discoloration in the past. I've heard folks talk about that being that way in the 70s, probably beyond that. But this seemed to be something that was more elevated and part of the reason for the investigation. So when DRMS and CPW then contacted the EPA, based on the fact that we have Ruby Mine in that proximity, and if you all are familiar with the Gold King Mine and the pieces that happened out of the Gold King Mine, there was some question as to whether or not the fish kill and the associated potential heavy metals in the creek were associated with the mine. When they contacted the EPA, they sent that actually to what's called CERCLA, or as we more commonly know it, the Superfund group. And the reason for that was because that group had the ability to go out, do some testing. They already had funding in place to actually then take some water samples in various locations and then potentially, help with making any decisions around whether or not this is a contamination associated with the mine, other natural sources, a combination of both, and then potentially, anything that might move forward. It wasn't a listing of the site on Superfund, and I want to make sure that was clear because that was one of the questions that when we initially found out about this that we had questions on. It was just around funding only to get that initial testing done. So all of that said, my department, and I think most departments in the county, were not aware that this had occurred. And so the EPA went out, did sampling in July of 2022, and then September of 2022. And the data that we're going to talk about is out of this report that the EPA then has utilized or issued in November of last year. So I just want to be clear on that. There's other pieces of data that we have out there. There's some sampling that several agencies, including my department, did in 2001. Not really included in this. It's a small sample size. This is really just around the EPA's data in their report.
Kurt, did you say 2001? Just want to be sure. Okay.
Yeah, in 2001, I think we worked with Andre, Roaring Fork Conservancy, my department, went out to Lincoln Creek over some concerns and did some water sampling then. But I didn't include that data in here.
Was it consistent with the EPA data?
The EPA data, at the end of the day, the EPA data is showing that there are what would appear to be increases. I think that's one of the important things in looking at this. There's the huge gaps in data points, and these are single points in time. So we need more, but that was one of the things that comes out of this, and I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. So in September of 2022, my department, and I think the rest of Pitkin County, that is when we learned that the EPA actually came out on site and they were doing sampling. At that point, we scrambled to let the EPA know that that was something that we were interested in and wanted to participate in. And since that point, Lisa and I have been working with the EPA on the data analysis and then the data report that they've put together that they just released. So the other piece that happened in that short time period after we learned about it was the idea that we should have some samples, our own, that we could at least corroborate the EPA's data with. So my department worked with a contractor, and on November 1st, after the pass had closed, we went out and at least grabbed some water samples and had them tested. Right there where Lincoln Creek, the convergence with the Roaring Fork River. So we would grab 3 samples, one at the creek and then 2, one above the convergence on the Roaring Fork River, one below. So we do have a little bit of data along that. Again, it's limited data just given the time of year that we were there and access issues and a couple other pieces.
Remind me again, did you say 2023 or is that 2020? 22.
22.
Okay.
Yes. So, and then the other piece of background, after the report was being worked on and the data had been released to the agencies working on the data, there was another site visit by the EPA, Division of Reclamation and Mining Safety, and then the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and then some of the local departments, including my staff, really around, and I'll show you a picture. There's a mineralized tributary that, when they sampled, appeared to be contributing, and at the end of the day contributes the majority of the metals contamination in the stream. The question that they were trying to work through at that point was, is that mineralized tributary being impacted by the Ruby mine? Is it part of the Ruby mine? Is it natural? So that was done on July 10th of 2023 and then is included in the report. So this is a picture of Lincoln Creek at the very bottom down here where this is the mine itself, and you can see the mountain itself in the color, and then it flows down, wants to progress, towards Grizzly Reservoir, which is this piece where there are another set of samples, and then on down with its convergence with Roaring Fork River. And again, there are some sample points in between there, and then again above the convergence of Lincoln Creek on the Roaring Fork and just below that.
And these are the EPA samples or
This
your
is the
samples?
EPA samples. This
Got
is
it.
all EPA data at this point.
Okay.
Correct. So again, some pictures, again, out of the report. You can see the various colorations in the creek. That sediment that is coming out, presumably, we're talking about on the left-hand side, that pinkish red is iron oxide, rust in all likelihood, maybe a few others. And then on the right, that is more whitish in color, probably aluminum oxide. Again, those metals are dropping out. There's a chemical change going on in the creek as it's flowing down. Whether that's a pH change or something else, I don't know that I know enough to tell you that, but we were seeing that. And then so you see this along the creek until you get close to the convergence, and at that point it does become more clear as it gets down by the campground. The colors are also seasonal, and I have an example of pictures that the Colorado Parks and Wildlife took that shows a dramatic difference in what it looked like in July of 22 versus what it looked like in September of 2022 that I can show as well. So this varies a little bit. You're probably getting flushing during snowpack, and then as the water content goes down, the flow goes down, you're probably then seeing more of this piece seasonal. Again, here's another picture. That's Grizzly Reservoir on the left. And again, you can see where it has a little bit of a turquoise color to it. And again, we didn't have pictures with data, but there are a lot of locals that will say that that looks like a physical appearance change, that it was a little more bluish in color and not as turquoise. So, again, that was part of the reason after looking at the fish kill that they decided to get some additional testing done to see what was going on. And again, just another example of sedimentation. And again, this is a picture later in the year, the September event.
And that's above the reservoir on the right side?
On the right side, yeah, that's right above the reservoir.
Got it.
And the reservoir is where the fish...
The fish kill occurred in the reservoir.
And just to clarify, there was a secondary fish kill as well, which Kurt may get to later, but the fish kill he's talking about occurred at Grizzly Reservoir. There's another one later at a different site.
Thank you.
Yeah, correct. So don't get overwhelmed by this data.
That was just for
this is
fun.
visual. This is purely visual. What I wanted to show, this is out of the EPA report. If you look at the colors, again, so red is exceeding acute and chronic standards for aquatic life. Yellow is just exceeding chronic standards for aquatic life. And then the two columns that are really predominant are aluminum, copper, and then iron to a lesser extent. And then the last one, and I wanted to address this a little bit because in the report it talks about exceedances for domestic water supply. And that's gray in color. And you can see, especially as you're moving up, there are exceedances. One of the important things is we're dealing with raw water. So it is a violation, but we're not seeing this utilized as a domestic water supply. So it's just for reference only to try to give you a frame of, what we're seeing. But, by the time this gets utilized for drinking water, we're well down valley and, have treatment and dilution that's all occurring before it ever gets consumed. But overall, we have some issues with, toxicity to aquatic life with what's coming out of the stream. Copper is probably the most important piece. That is something that I think has been identified, but not at these levels previously, is my understanding. Francie, that was the question that you had. And copper, of the metals that you see with the colors, is the highest in toxicity to both aquatic life and human health. So that would be the major concern. All of them are concerns, but that would be the biggest concern. And I can get to that in a little bit as well.
Can I ask you a question?
Please, go ahead.
So Kurt, when you mentioned that all of this is removed before it enters any of the drinking water supply, I thought it was really hard to remove these metals from water.
Well, yes, dilution's probably the more correct way to say that. So Grizzly Reservoir is a water source for Colorado Springs and Aurora or Arvada, I don't remember which one. But that is combined with so many different water sources. And then, in the case of like the city of Colorado Springs, they're having to demonstrate that they're meeting the domestic water supply requirements before it ever gets distributed to their citizens.
So it's really dilution, not removable.
That's the more correct way to say that. Yeah,
it's
thanks.
twofold. So solution to pollution is dilution. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. That is certainly simplified, but more water makes a big difference. Where those domestic water supplies are located certainly makes a big difference. The length that the water travels. Are there other gaining sort of reaches that are contributing to that? So Kurt mentioned, the Twin Lakes water is diverted over to the eastern slope. Colorado Springs Utility has some ability to use it. There's some use for farming over on the eastern slope as well. Those public water supplies have an obligation to meet state standards for drinking water. So they're running it through their system. And we have no information about what the quality looks like on the eastern slope when it's entering their system. But I can tell you that they have the obligation to meet state CDPHE standards the same way anybody on the western slope does. So the water supply for Aspen is not located on the Roaring Fork. There's some wells that are not used but are decreed on the Roaring Fork, but the water supply for Aspen is on Maroon and Castle Creeks. So they aren't seeing an effect on their water supply that is requiring additional efforts to make sure it meets standards. And by the time it's reaching other downstream localities, there's a significant more water in the system. So, Mid-Valley Metro or other entities that are pulling water, we haven't heard anything from them in terms of concern about meeting human health standards for drinking water.
Great, thanks, Laura.
Question about on the eastern slope. So we weren't sampling on, say, the other side of the tunnel or at the inflow.
Yeah.
But would that even matter? It would be more like they would need to sample it at the outflow of their water supply in the reservoirs or inflow somewhere pretty far downstream.
So at this point, we haven't done anything on the eastern slope. We have not done the majority of the sampling up here. Kurt, with support from Healthy Rivers, when there was a report of the discoloration back in 2020, did go out and do independent sampling. we perhaps were not invited to the EPA's sampling party initially, and that led to a concern that we wanted to have a data set that was totally within Pitkin's control. So what he's showing you up there is EPA data. We had a separate small data set as well at those 3 locations he mentioned.
Great. Okay, great. Thanks.
Something to
Andre?
that. And it is true, Francie, that some of those metals do precipitate out of solution, and that's what you're seeing when you see all that yellow buoy on the coating of the river. So as the water goes down from the source into the reservoir and beyond, all the way along, it's losing some of the metals by combining with stuff. Something to keep in mind, though, is that a lot of that is just ending up in Grizzly Reservoir. So those metals are going down, combining with other ions, settling down in Grizzly Reservoir, because that's where all the water flow stops. So it's effectively holding a lot of the metal contamination in the bottom of the reservoir. Keep that in mind for
So it's
future
going to become
discussion.
another hanging lake. So
And then some of it does get down into Lower Lincoln Creek and down onto the Roaring Fork a little bit. When you see a little bit of precipitate, like down in North Star, sometimes you'll see a white precipitate after a couple of these events that have happened in the last decade. And that's the metals combining with some of the salts and settling out a solution.
And a mitigation for mines is to build settling ponds. And so technically we have Grizzly Reservoir as a settling pond, Twin Lakes settling ponds, which is, and that wasn't their original intention.
it did look a little bit similar to the other side of Leadville.
All right. On to the next. Again, this is EPA's data, but this is based on flow and concentration, and I found this fascinating. So if you look, they're talking about the loading of copper itself. And in some cases, you're looking at 20 pounds of copper a day coming down Lincoln Creek.
Jeez.
To Andre's point, some of that is settling out as you get down, because if you look at again, to the right side, that's towards the convergence of the Roaring Fork. To the left is the Ruby Mine area, and it's dropping as you get lower in the creek. Presumably, you're seeing that drop out as precipitate, but still a fair amount of metal that is coming out, especially in the upper portions of that creek. So, what we've heard from the EPA is that may be some of the highest concentration that they have seen, or at least the most amount that they have seen. So I thought that was really surprising in hearing that from them.
Yeah, from one of their seasoned people that's been doing this for almost 40 years. That was a comment that they made, which was a little disturbing.
So clearly we've got some issues going on here. So to talk a little bit about what the report contains and just the highlight of the major pieces. And again, in the agenda item summary, I put a link into the report. It's great sleeping materials, 631 pages. So
Just to clarify,
this is
total is 631. The readable stuff is like 39 pages. So it is totally readable.
It is totally readable. I just didn't want anyone to print out 631 pages. A couple of the highlights. So what the EPA is saying is that the mineralized tributary is the largest contributor of metals, and in this case especially copper, to Lincoln Creek. That is a natural source, is what they are saying. So again, these are data points in time. This is 2022. So when we talk about future things, I think that's one of the important pieces to remember here as we're looking at data points here. A lot of variables that come into play when you think about watersheds, even just snowpack and how much water there is in the system. That can impact that. So the other piece that really caught my attention is the idea that climate change may actually be impacting the metals and the concentration of metals. The report points to another report that talks about, for lack of a better way to talk about it, permafrost. I don't know if that's the exact term, but essentially we have water locked up in the mountain itself. That because of climate change and the warming, that water is melting, coming into contact with those metals, and then actually pulling more of those metals out of the mountain, and that may be contributing to this. And then the question becomes, if it's contributing, does it get worse? How does that impact the river as we move forward? Again, I talked a little bit about the contamination levels vary spring to summer, to fall and winter. So the other piece to talk about a little bit is, so we obviously have contamination in the river. What to do about it? The EPA, the CERCLA program itself, does not deal with natural sources. So what they're really looking at are man-made sources that the Smuggler Superfund is a great example. That is something that was, the mine tailings were moved by humans to a different location, and so we've been working on ensuring that we minimize the risk there. So in this case, what they're saying is that this isn't something that falls under their program, and that they would not be taking the lead moving forward with this. They would be available for advice if we wanted more information and technical support, but it's not theirs to lead. So,
Question.
yes.
I understand that there may have been an issue with EPA not wanting to go on private land. So maybe they don't have the full picture. Is that a concern?
It's certainly a consideration. They did not receive permission to go into the mine or right up to the property, inside the property, to collect samples. They collected samples from what we call the adit that comes out of the mine. The water that's coming out of the mine, they collected that right there on the other side of the property, and then again below in the stream to approximate the water samples there.
Does that seem reasonable? I mean, to really get an idea of whether it's natural or not? Could it be natural and coming out of the mine and still be natural?
Could it be both?
Could it be both?
Right.
Yeah.
I think those are questions. A lot of this report generated more questions than answers. So
Yeah.
it's my next slide.
Okay. Keep going.
And so, there I go. I think there are a number of things moving forward. In the agenda item summary, I included a number of questions, by no means an exhaustive number of questions around, okay, so we have contamination in the creek. We don't understand everything about that contamination. We need to learn more. Your question around, Ruby Mine, I think is still a piece to answer. I think there's still a piece to answer around climate change. How is Grizzly Reservoir playing with this, as Andre pointed out? And a number of locals share that same piece. So even though the EPA is stepping back, a number of local organizations in the state are saying, okay, that's great, but we need to take it and start moving with it, because that doesn't give us the answers we need in our community to start to determine, okay, what do we do? So we did go ahead and start to assemble a local group, and included several agencies. Had a meeting last Friday just to start moving forward with the idea of what is it that we need to answer still? What is it that the community
Kurt,
needs to hear?
I hate to step back,
Sure.
but can you share with us who is involved in that work group?
Yeah. So we had the Independence Pass Foundation, my department, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Healthy Rivers, Forest Service,
Roaring Fork Conservancy.
Roaring Fork Conservancy. How did I forget that one? We identified that at that first meeting we need to include Twin Lakes, so we included Twin Lakes. The other one was City of Aspen. So I got PJ's contacted the City of Aspen and invited them to. We have a second meeting now scheduled for the 9th. So, and again, the impetus at this meeting was to say, here's the group that we thought of. If it needs to be bigger, that's fine. Just let's identify those people to make sure we're being inclusive.
It's really a coalition of the willing.
Pretty much, yes.
That's a great way to put that. So, but there's a common interest here in understanding how to move forward. Again, given a number of questions we have around the impacts that we may be seeing. So the other piece to talk about is, we talk about mitigation. There's an aspect of public information that we are all talking about with it being on Forest Service land. There's a campground there. How do we get this information out to the public? What's the toxicology piece of this? There was a meeting Thursday that was with the state health department toxicologist to start talking about, what information, is the water okay to drink for campers? We're not sure we'll be able to answer things like, can my pet play in the water, but can we recreate in the water? And then how do we disseminate that information to not only the locals, but we know that with the campground, we have a lot of people visiting. So how are we consistently communicating that message once we get that message developed, including does it even need to be posted? And I think that's one of the pieces that's come up a number of times.
Hey, Kurt, we've got a question from Kelly.
Sure.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you. I think we're going to get a feedback here,
You're good.
but let me try. Okay. I'm wondering, what is the status of the mine and who owns it? And have they been invited to the working group?
They have not been invited to the working group as of yet. I don't know that we know ownership. We haven't worked on that piece yet.
It's an LLC ownership.
It's an LLC. Yeah.
Is it active, the mine?
Not to the best of our knowledge. This is a property that was proposed to be put into the Forest Service. There's a TDR pulled on it. It has a long and convoluted land use history, but it was originally intended to be put into the Forest Service, but when all of the EPA investigation came about, the Forest Service sort of pulled back the brakes on that. And so at this point in time, the mine itself is in private LLC ownership. I think that there are discussions that we are not party to between that LLC and the Forest Service that may or may not be ongoing, but at least we're ongoing historically. The Forest Service owns the land surrounding the mine, and so the samples were taken on that Forest Service land around the mine.
Great, thank you. Kurt, any more? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, there are a couple other pieces. So the EPA is doing a presentation, and it's informational, this Thursday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Rocky Mountain Institute. This is a little outside their box. They don't release press releases when they do these reports, and they're not used to doing public presentations. So, I want to thank them for coming up and doing it. It's informational in the majority of it, a lot more technical information than I just gave you around the whys, why we did this, why we did that, the information that they found. So if you'd like more information, please, there's an RSVP form with a link, but obviously it's, I just gave you the time and location too, so come and show up. We are looking at ways to capture questions in case we don't have time to answer all of the questions that we get there. I think that's one of the things is the local group that we've just anticipated there may be a lot of questions, and how are we going to follow up with that?
Now, can I ask, who's putting this on? Is the EPA, did they organize it with RMI, or did the working group, or did you?
Mostly the working
you?
group did the core.
Actually, I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, it's good to know.
Yeah, yeah.
But we invited the EPA and asked them to come do that because we felt like there were a number of pieces we couldn't answer as a local group with the whys and hows with this report.
They gave 10 minutes at the end. They did do that for some local folks to be able to get on a panel, but it is only 10 minutes. So, but we're trying to, Brian, Kurt's staff has gotten something together where people can get on their phones and ask questions. We're also going to offer that they can hang out with us afterwards and drink coffee or tea. We have the place for an extra half hour if they want to intermingle with us and ask us some specific questions, or just have us put those questions forward in our next working group meeting.
How many RSVPs do you have?
14.
Yeah, it's very small.
It's very small.
But I sort of suspect that because we did give the time and place. So in this area, that's kind of what happens. I think people show up.
Number of folks on our working group indicated they expected people weren't going to RSVP, they would just show up. So really quick, just to get through a couple more of these things. So as a working group, again, I think we all have an agreement about additional data. Again, we don't just have climate change data, but just understanding the seasonality and how this looks in a more regular basis and not just a couple of points in time, I think is an important piece to consider moving forward. And how we do that, I think, is still one of the questions. The EPA did install what they called sippers, which were at 4 locations, and that took water samples throughout 2023 at various paces, whether that was once a week all the way up to a couple of times a week. And they were just cables that were coiled with a pump on it and a controller that would pull it in. That data we literally just got weeks ago.
Yeah.
Something like that. There are about 6,000 data points there. So there's still a need to even go through that to look at what 2023 looked like. The EPA is very clear that this is research data. The quantity of sample that they pulled is smaller than what their standard samples are. So, but it's still, I think, good data that we can use to at least start to understand pieces. This year, we also, I worked with the Roaring Fork Conservancy. We went to the Healthy Rivers Board and asked for some funding to do some water sampling around Grizzly Reservoir because we have construction happening this summer. And I think there was a wanting to understand how that might impact or has potential to impact the lower part of Lincoln Creek and the Roaring Fork. Depending on how we do it, could also probably start to maybe answer some of the questions around this idea of the reservoir being a sink and how that works with the rest of the watershed. Is it, we have more than Lincoln Creek going into the reservoir, so is it just dilution factor there? Is there more going on or metal settling out? I think there's some opportunities to, start to help answer those questions as well. We have the report framed. We just haven't had the working group actually look at it, make comment on it, so we can bring it back to the Healthy Rivers Board for approval. We need to talk more. We've had there was an initial meeting, although ironically, you'd think public health would have been invited to the toxicology meeting, and I wasn't. But engaging CDPHE in, again, understanding the aquatic toxicology piece, so that we understand what it is we need to be communicating out to the public around the stream itself. We have some questions around the geotechnical investigation that was done. I think, you've already put up, understanding more about Ruby Mine itself and how maybe that's contributing and getting access and working with our company, as well as just understanding with geologists the idea that the mineralized tributary itself is natural, and making sure that I think that information is correct is the other piece there. And then the last one is mitigation. Again, I already talked about public information, but one of the other things that keeps coming up is, can we do some type of source reduction? Can we, have settling ponds? Can we do those things? And I think that's a really big question that I think is going to take a lot more to answer. It's not a simple thing to do, but it may be something as a community that we really want to look hard at. We suspect that, as Laura mentioned, we had a fish kill last summer that was in the North Star that may be related to all of this. The leading thought is that we still have copper concentrations high enough that in September, when this occurred, the water temperatures actually increased. And one of the interesting pieces with copper is the toxicity increases with temperature. And that may have been enough to create this fish kill. And then the question becomes, okay, we saw this. Is there a chance that we're going to see more? Because those sorts of questions that getting answered, I think, is going to help us with, do we need to then take additional action or further action? And what that looks like is just, that's a very large question to ask.
Great, thanks. Kelly has another question.
Yeah, I'm curious about the sampling plan related to what you were just talking about at North Star. What is the sampling going to come down that far? Is it going to happen in the same intervals that the sampling happens further up? What does that look like?
And
CPW, maybe you could talk to that too.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Yeah.
So Kelly, are you thinking about the Grizzly Reservoir piece? The sampling that I mentioned there?
Future sampling.
Future sampling.
I'm curious. Well, I don't have a very clear picture of what the ongoing sampling is going to look like and how far down the watershed it will take place. Will it take place down at North Star so that we can be collecting data to know if the temperature increase is contributing to copper toxicity increases, or what does that look like?
We don't have a solid answer on that yet, because I think part of what we're trying to do as a group is organize and get a plan together on what we want to do for sampling. That said, I think that there are already sampling pieces going on place. Is it Riverwatch that's already doing some pieces that I believe they're looking at trying to, utilize that program to at least help there. And I think that's one of the considerations we have as we think about monitoring is what do we have existing that's already addressing baseline and then continuing to move forward with what else do we need to then add in. And so that's one of those major discussion points that we need to have still.
Yeah, it's a good point, Kelly. I think, I mean, and CPW is highly motivated because they want to keep fish alive. So, you know, they're obviously very involved with this, and they're gonna, you know, definitely be helpful in making some of those decisions, I think, and trying to understand some of the more sampling sites and that kind of stuff. Well, Roaring Fork Conservancy too. I think Roaring Fork Conservancy is kind of bracing themselves because they're, you know, they're very good at water sampling, and they're like, okay, so how much more water sampling are we going to do? But all of those things are to be determined.
I want to go to Steve next. I see his hands up, and then Kelly, you're back on again.
Yeah, I have a question about possible mitigation. It seems feasible to me that in the small streams with a small amount of water coming down with the majority of the minerals in there, that it would be possible to build a small settling pond and perhaps add some kind of a flocculant or binder or something to tie up the minerals and have them settle to the bottom, then periodically have a backhoe and just clean the stuff out of the bottom of the settling pond and put it in some good storage place where it can't get into the watershed. Is that sort of technology feasible in your estimation, Kurt? Something we could consider going forward?
You know, I know just enough to be dangerous about that. Could it be? I suppose it could be. I see a number of challenges with the site in terms of mitigation. We have access issues. The pass is closed and it's under snow, you know, however many months of the year, depending on snowpack. You know, to add a flocculant and precipitate the metals out, yes, but then that's likely going to have to be hauled off as a hazardous waste. Right, I don't know, and I don't know about the opportunity to just like bury that aside. Those are all things that are well outside my purview. My first job out of college was actually working on Haggerty Creek in Wyoming that had the Rudafeha mine copper contamination, and we were hired by the EPA to actually just conduct water sampling, vetting. The Colorado School of Mines did some work there trying to understand if they could mitigate the sampling. So, and I just know the challenges of that site. They had issues with snow blowing out their settling ponds when they had a high snow year. There's all sorts of considerations there. So I think the best thing I can say is it a possibility? Maybe, but it's not going to be an easy possibility. I don't want to sugarcoat that with the idea that it's going to be an easy thing. I think but it may be something that as a community that we really feel strongly about too. So I don't want to say no either.
And yeah, real quickly, on Thursday night, there's gonna be some folks at the meeting at RMI that will be talking about some efforts at Peekaboo Gulch and some other areas that have some of these natural contaminants and the success or failure that they've had. So if anybody can make that meeting, you will hear some of that then. Because that's right nearby, not too far away, actually, if you start hiking toward Crested Butte.
I'd love to ask, should we be inviting to that meeting? I know it was recommended that Trout Unlimited be notified and included in conversation. Ken Newbecker's on, who's the local contact for them. And they've done a lot of, I guess, mitigation and river restoration efforts with mining companies in the past. So it occurs to me there may be others. You mentioned a name I hadn't heard before just now about one of the somebody's doing sampling. Like, who are they? Are they part of the working group? Riverwatch. Are they part of the working group, or should they? It's Roaring Fork Conservancy. Okay, thank you. They changed the name on me. Just want to see if there's anyone else who should be invited to start gathering information on this.
I think at this point, anyone should be invited. I think the important thing is that this is really the MPA talking about that report. So if we have already agreed as a group that we need to have another public meeting once we have some more of the answers to some of the questions that we have and prior to the pass opening. right? And especially around the media release. But I think at that point, those are things where we'll really start to see that discussion happening. So it's a yes and.
Got it.
And if I might tag on there, even if we don't have answers, it might be worth having discussions, because the EPA has looked at this through the legislative framework that they're given, right? Kurt has mentioned CERCLA several times, and that is an act that spells out, you know, when the EPA goes in, what do they need to look at, what do they consider, and what can they do, right? And they've come in under that framework and looked at this and said, okay, these are the conclusions that we've drawn, and that's what this means for us. That is not the framework that this board or any other entity in this community needs to use as what they consider this to be, and what the future of Lincoln Creek and any sort of downstream effects from mineral loading are, right? There is no box that you guys are bound within. So just to clarify, I think the EPA has been a large portion of this because they have a great deal of expertise. If it were not naturalized occurring, there would be obligations by the EPA and financing that comes along with that. And so typically they come in and sort of set that framework. What we're hearing and what the report says is, based on the information we have, we don't think we fall within that. They do leave open, you know, if additional information comes to light, you know, if there's some groundwater monitoring that suggests other things, they might re-enter the conversation. But as they step away, what they've done is create a highly technical report with a lot of good data that can be used moving forward by the coalition of the willing.
Right, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Kelly has another question.
Yeah. What are the human health exposure risks for this? Would someone experience symptoms, you know, if they decide to run into Grizzly Reservoir, their kid toddles along Lincoln Creek while camping? What does that look like? Like, what should the public be concerned about there?
We don't have an official piece yet from CDPHE. What I understand that occurred in the meeting last Thursday with the toxicologist was not concern around recreation in the water itself. There are some concerns around consumption, simply because if you think about camping and filtering, the filter that you bring camping typically is taking out microbial, bacteriological parasites, that sort of thing, not necessarily metals. And given the amount of metals, you're talking about a large filter. So I think they're leaning towards recommending not consuming the water based on those pieces. Symptoms, my understanding, would be more along the lines of digestive than anything else for a short-term consumption like that. Again, Kelly, those are pieces that we don't have full answers, so we haven't given out that full, but that was the piece that I understand is how it was talked about. So there'll be more to come on that as an official statement.
Great, thanks, Kurt. I want to look around the room to see if I have any other questions or comments from anyone. We're going to tie this up. We're running out of time. We got to move on to Wild and Scenic. Karen, I included you earlier just to see if you had something you wanted to add, but if not, that's fine. There'll be more opportunities. But just want to invite you to come up if you want.
I really appreciate this presentation. It's really well done. Thank you, Kurt.
You have to come up to a mic if you're going to say more than that. And identify yourself
just really
for us.
Here to
This is
affirm-
Karen Teague, everybody.
Yeah, hi, sorry. I'm the executive director of the Independence Pass Foundation, and I'm mostly just here to affirm our commitment of time, energy, and funding to make sure we find some independent consultants who can get up there this summer, walk the entire tributary as was recommended in the report by the Colorado Department of Mine Reclamation. You can access the top of the tributary purely on public land. So, you know, why that didn't happen, I don't know the answer to that. But that can be done, should be done. It's also raises questions in my mind as to the fact that the EPA has identified the Ruby mine adit portion as being small compared to the mineralized tributary. So that still would seem to fall under their purview. It's a question. It's a real question whether we even want the EPA involved at this point, quite frankly. And I'm just really happy that Kurt and Lisa and the whole crew are getting together and starting to work towards solutions, because that's, we're really seeing the effects on the Roaring Fork River folks, and it's worrisome. So thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.
Chair to chair, we've got a board member
Yep,
who
I
has
see
a
Bill.
comment. Right.
Hi, Bill.
Kurt, my question is, as I understand it, the EPA is suggesting that more of this is coming down some natural drainage than out of the mine. And how far is that drainage in feet from the mine, roughly? You don't need to be precise about that.
I can show you a picture. I kind of thought that
Come on.
we might be wanting to talk a little bit more. So this is the upper portion of Lincoln Creek.
Can you zoom in a bit?
Yeah, let's see how fast I can do that. I don't have a.
There you go. Good job.
So, and this approximately the center.
Above the reservoir here, just
Here,
when
thank
you're
you.
thinking about it. If you've ever been up there, you see off to the right, there was the parking lot for Anderson and Petroleum Lakes if you're hiking up there.
I can
And
actually
then
zoom
you
out.
see this zigzag road that's headed up towards the mine, just so we know where we're talking about.
I can, in the top of the screen there's
They're
the
close.
reservoir.
Actually, zoom in again and
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for touchscreens.
Yeah.
There we go.
About there. So you can see.
Mine adit is right there.
Right.
So that thing there is coming straight out of the ground. And this is the natural flow.
Yeah.
So they're a couple hundred yards.
And
to
then
answer your
where's
question.
Lincoln Creek? That's down the
It's-
left side,
It's the yellow, sadly.
of course.
So here's my question, Kurt. Do you have access to the surveys of the mine, the internal maps of the mine that tell you how far over, how close they do get within the mine to this drainage? And is possibly that proximity an explanation for who's contributing what to the source here?
Right. I don't. I think that's one of the questions that, again, when we talk about the Ruby Mine that Greg brought up, that I don't know how far DRMS and EPA went in terms of making that determination when they walked that. And I think that's one of the pieces to ask in verifying is, are they correct in that relationship? And I think that's just one piece of that
Yeah.
we'll have to figure out how to answer. But I think that is a question.
And the report relies on DRMS geologists looking at existing mapping, not mapping that was done concurrent with this investigation. So, this is historical data that was done on a large scale, not current mapping that was done on a small scale for this site. So that when Kurt talks about future geological investigations, looking at this harder might fall within that.
What kind of mine was it?
Gold, I believe. That's what they were ultimately looking for. I think they got a lot of other stuff out of it.
Not rubies.
Yeah.
And Kurt, how far up, looking at the road here, how far up was the samples taken above the actual mine point?
So, knowing that, if I come back to the map here, let me see. I don't know if I can physically zoom in there for you though. Yeah, give me 1 second. So I had this up just to show you the dramatic difference between
wow.
July and September of 2022. But what I want to do really quick
That's interesting.
is they actually zoom in on the mine, and it shouldn't take me that long to get there.
That's not going to make me thirsty anymore.
Yeah.
Anybody who drinks that would Not before smart.
It'd be like chewing on pennies.
It's like a
There we go.
turmeric latte. You know?
Right, yeah, exactly. Thank you, yeah.
All right, so here's your, to answer your question, here's the map with the various sources. Again, you can see the mine road itself, the zigzagging up, and the tailings pile, and then where the adit is.
And the mineralized tributary damage, the other end of the arrow point, is that actively flowing typically?
They took a flow rate off of it. I don't know if it's flowing year-round, but at the time, yes, it was flowing. That's why they were able to.
Flowing
They
back.
actually have a flow rate in the data to tell you how fast it was flowing.
I'm just saying, as far as like, could we get a sample from up a lot higher that'd be consistent, which might. 'Cause it
Yeah,
seems-
I
it
you know,
seems
without
like these are
source point.
more on the similar grade.
Right. This is right along the road, so more this is the adit sample point here.
Okay.
Sorry. And so they took that up here versus down where it intersected with the creek. I would assume that there might be opportunities, but I think, again, I haven't walked this myself, so I don't have.
It's flowing strong in the summer.
Yeah.
This is fascinating, and I'd love to just dive in and go down the rabbit hole, but I think that we probably ought to wrap it up and get to our crystal conversation. But obviously, there are a lot of questions here, and I just want to make sure we've got the right people in the room to start discussing how to address that. And so I want to encourage you all to reach out, and if there's anybody you need to gain access to, or you want to invite somebody, I just think this is when we're gathering information and trying to come up with hypothesis on how this is happening. More the merrier right now. And I'm looking at Andre because he's my scientific go-to. And I'm hoping as many people we can get to that meeting, and there will be another one shortly after for a debrief, perhaps after that, or brainstorming. But thank you for that. It's a big concern for me, and I'm concerned about water quality in the Roaring Fork as we see future water diversions, perhaps, or at least drought conditions reducing the flows in the Roaring Fork. To begin with, it's a perfect storm of to kill a river, really, and I think we need to work on protecting the Roaring Fork as best we can. So,
And
I think our board
on
agrees.
behalf of the Healthy Rivers Board, we hope that we can have more frequent joint meetings with the Board of County Commissioners, as we've been too infrequent in gathering together, because I think we have common interests in these kinds of things.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move us right along to the next topic is the wild and scenic designation on the Crystal.
Thanks, Kurt.
And I'm wondering, thanks, Kurt, thanks for coming down. Thanks, Karen. Lisa and Lisa, I'm looking at you. Or do I look to Kelly? Or do I look to Laura?
You can look to anybody. That's the fun thing about being the chair. You can look
I
at
can
whoever
pick
you
on anybody
want
to talk about something?
and put them on the spot.
Let's kick this off with Lisa.
Well, I think, Kelly, you've got a PowerPoint here. Do you want me to share my screen, or were you prepared to do that? But I think that might be a great place to start, because she's got some slides. Does that sound good, Kelly? It's up to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't totally get organized here. So let me
Okay.
share my screen, and I'll just share my screen, and that way I can
Okay.
control the slides, and you don't have to worry about it.
Great.
Yeah, you guys are gonna see the embarrassingly large number of tabs I have open. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, and so let me go. Oh, it's not letting me do the slideshow. Sorry,
can you give us the full screen on
Yeah,
that?
go
Don't
full
share, I can
screen
put
at the
it in
bottom.
my-
Yeah, full screen at the bottom. There, under view. Yep. Full screen.
It's better.
All right, is that better? Is that okay for folks?
a little
I'll try
better.
to.
I think we can read it, Kelly.
Okay, and I'll just talk through it. So, Yeah, I know our BoCC has been kept up to date, but I'm grateful to have this joint meeting with the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. And I thought it might be helpful to just give a quick summary of what has been accomplished in the last 9 months, really. It's been, for those of us who have been committed to wild and scenic on the Crystal River for a long time, this has felt like a slow process, but I think that the collaborative stakeholder work has gotten a lot done in a fairly short period of time. And so, as you all may remember, you all came to the BoCC and said, can we revive this effort on trying to get the Crystal designated by the federal government as a wild and scenic river? And so I reached out to the other government entities and invited them all to the table to commit to discussing this. And they agreed that they were interested in the topic and hearing from the community. So we created this chairing group of Pickens County, Gunnison County, the town of Marble, and the Colorado River District. And we went through a process to raise money, including the $25,000 contribution plus more from the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, and fund to support an effort. And we went out for RFP for facilitators. We hired Wendy Green-Lowe and Jacob Bornstein to facilitate this community process to discuss the feasibility of wild and scenic river designation and other protections for the Crystal. American Whitewater has collaborated and provided administrative support throughout all of this. And then some milestones of the process have included our community summit kickoff at the end of April last year up at the Marble Firehouse. And we had over 120 people attended that, and were guided by our facilitators through a community discussion about what we all love and cherish about the river, what we see as the status quo, and what we want to protect into the future. And then all those attendees were invited to apply to sit as stakeholders for the steering committee to further dive in and discuss the river. So the chairs, with guidance from the facilitators, selected 26 members of that steering committee. We've had excellent attendance from almost all of the membership throughout this process. We've met monthly since June to be guided through conversations to figure out, can we get to wild and scenic? Is this the best process? Are there other approaches that people want to consider? What are the values that we all want to see and can build consensus around in protecting the river? And then another milestone was the October Community Summit, where we had over 200 people attend at the Roaring Fork High School in Carbondale, where everyone was invited to learn about a variety of different ways that rivers are protected in Colorado and beyond. We've had pretty extensive community education opportunities that have been preserved. So if anyone is interested in diving into some of these topics, the Crystal Valley Echo has generously hosted all of the group memory from all of the steering committees or stakeholder steering committees meetings, as well as webinars that were produced and the community summits that were attended by the community. So some of these webinars included presentation from experts related to different approaches to protecting rivers, the status of water rights on the Crystal River, land use regulations in Pickens and Gunnison County, the impacts of climate change on the river and the watershed, and the state of health of the river. What is the condition of the water quality in the riparian corridors and the ecological health in the river. The presentations we heard at the summit included from experts from the federal government who have implemented wild and scenic river designation across the country. We heard from a stakeholder participant at the Dolores National Conservation Area, and some discussion about either that process or a special management area protection that the group considered. We talked about alternative management plans, such as localized watershed management plans, an IGA among relevant government districts, and strengthening 1041 powers at the county level. We reviewed what's in the Crystal River Watershed Management Plan. We heard from CWCB staff about in-stream flows and those water rights, as well as RISIDs, which we're familiar with because we have one on the Roaring Fork. And we also heard about outstanding waters designation, which happens at the Water Quality Commission at the state level, and which your board is engaged in around Picken County as well. Let's see. One coming out of this stakeholder process was agreement around criteria that the group had consensus we wanted to use on deciding what is the best way to protect the river. And these were the criteria that we ultimately settled on, including, is the solution durable and effective? Does it provide sustainable public access for recreation and tourism? Does it prevent dams and out-of-basin diversions? Does it protect local agriculture and water rights? Does it maintain local control and involvement of the management of the river as well as property rights? Does it protect the natural hydrograph and the riparian health of the watershed? Does it manage future land use development? And do we have the resources and capability to implement it? Is it feasible to get it done? So we have used all that criteria. We've sort of narrowed down a whole variety of approaches, and the group is coming to our final meetings. Our contract with the facilitators was through January, except that we didn't have a January meeting. We've moved it to the end of February, on February 29th. And there is some discussion about possibly extending that one more month to really get a written recommendation nailed in. The discussion we will have leading up and on the 29th is related to these two very similar options. And there's consensus from the whole group around both of these options. And so we have some work on kind of digging in. There's a lot of interest to tackle some state and local approaches to protecting the river, as they're seen as things that we can do right away. That dialogue is surrounded around, like, can the counties get together and strengthen our 1041 protections? Could the 5 government jurisdictions enter into an IGA with each other to agree not to pursue any, or pursue any dams or out-of-basin diversions? Could we, are we interested in some outstanding waters protections? Are there elements of the watershed plan that, we would choose to prioritize? So those are some of there's a lot of interest in doing that. Folks see it as concrete, near term, and protective of the river. And then there's additional, ongoing conversation related to wild and scenic, and let's continue to put together a package for a wild and scenic designation and work together to hammer out where there continue to be differences and reservations. So that is sort of the work for the next meeting or two. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to get to a point where we can identify some processes and structures for, again, doing some of that more near-term state and local stuff, including possibly pursuing a in-stream water flow right that would protect the peak flows of the hydrograph, which I think is really important to include in there, as well as create a working group related to, like, what would a wild and scenic designation look like in the Crystal? What are the sticky wickets that we need to work through so that we can present, that to our federal delegation? Our federal delegation has been participating all along. They've provided really good insight into the process all along and have attended most of the meetings. So they're very involved and engaged in what the conversations have been. And I will leave it at that.
Thanks, Kelly.
And Lisa and Laura have also been very active participants. They can fill in any blanks that I've missed.
We're gonna have to wrap it up pretty quickly, but if there's anything you want to add to cap it off, that's kind of a great in detail of how things have progressed. Thank you, Kelly. I know you've worked really hard on this. Question from?
Yeah, are any of the packages and options exclusive?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, there are a lot of question marks, I'm sure, and we're going to stay tuned, and we're supportive of all the work you're doing there. Thank you so much for everybody who's involved in this. That pretty much brings us to the end of this joint meeting. Is there anything else you'd like to say, or do you need a motion to adjourn your meeting?
We have to have a motion. This is, Bill, you have 3 minutes.
May I have 3 minutes? Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Our function, of course, is to advise you concerning expenditures from the fund and management of the fund. You had before you this morning a grant application, which is, I think, probably 5, 6, maybe 8 times larger than any other grant that has ever been made to us. And yet you have so far received less comment concerning the finances of that grant than any other grant you've ever considered, I believe. You know a lot more about $20,000 to the Marbles Charter School than the large contribution to a ditch repair this morning. We meet on February 15 as our February meeting, and at our January meeting we talked about making a comment to you, further comment to you on the East Mesa grant application. We haven't had a chance to do that before this meeting, so my question is, would a comment coming from us after our February 15 meeting, would that still be timely before you make a final decision on the grant application you considered this morning?
Great, thanks, Bill. And you're referring to something that we were talking about in executive session. And so I'm going to look at Laura, who's nodding her head to say, yes, it's not too late on February 15th. I think also maybe it would be helpful if the county attorneys are there to brief you at your February 15th meeting.
She always is.
Always is, okay. All right, so just so that you're all up to speed, I think that's the only way I would know how to deal with this. But I appreciate your request to be involved in it. Yes, it's an important topic, and I can't say any more about it because I'm not sure how far I can go.
Yeah, I think that the BoCC will hear the funding request from East Mesa sometime in the future, and I think any additional input that Healthy Rivers has that you guys put together on the next meeting would easily be considered by the board.
And as I mentioned in my own opening remarks, as teenagers, we're going to revisit our originating documents and invite you or any other member of the board to participate in that dialogue, since we're to advise you as advisory board members.
Right,
and
great,
we want to
thank you.
discharge that.
I think that's great, thank you. It's great to revisit it. I was on the very first Healthy Rivers board, and it doesn't seem that long ago, but I guess it was. Teenagers grow up quickly. Andre was on there with me, and so was Bill, as I recall. And Lisa, and to see the new members on there. Thank you all for your participation, for staying on top of this. And I was just thinking about teenagers. What we try to do is emancipate them.
Yes.
To go out and make a living on their own. And don't come to us for money. That sort of thing.
Well,
is that
in
what?
a couple more years.
Okay.
Well, on the upside, these teenagers, have a source of money, and
true.
they're helping you
It's
spend
a trust
it.
fund, yeah.
That's right. We're trust kids.
Trustees, right.
And Greg, I know you had a question when we presented the grant process to you last couple weeks ago, if what the fund was earning every year, and we did hit a $2 million mark last year,
That's
and we're
amazing.
looking at close to that again this year, and likely hit the
So
$2
there's a
million mark.
lot of good work can be done, and I know you're very prudent and frugal in your application of those resources. So thank you all for the work you put into it.
And I am planning on attending the next meeting.
Oh, great.
Great, thank you, Francie. Did you make a motion to?
I would entertain a motion to adjourn from my board.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We are adjourned.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. This was great. Good meeting, great presentations. Of course, there's always more questions at the end of these meetings than there were at the beginning. So we're a little bit behind. Actually, we're not. We're only a minute behind on our break. We're going to take about a 15-minute break and come back at 2:45. 14-minute break. Hello, we're back with the January 30th work session of the Board of County Commissioners. Boy, January sure went by quickly. And up next on our agenda is prep for the BoCC retreat, February 6th and 7th. We're going to take about an hour to sort this out. And John Peacock is on deck.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And we may or may not need an hour. I wanted to schedule some time just because we're on a short timeline before we get together next week, as it is for this retreat. I do have a draft agenda that I'll put up on the screen and share with you. It is just that, a draft. It may be a straw man y'all want to change. It may be good as proposed. I want to kind of share my thinking behind it, before we jump in. And I'm hearing from individual commissioners, there's a lot of desire to have an opportunity to dive in on some specific issues, and there's a desire to have time to do that. Organizationally, we've also talked about the need to have a broader conversation really about whether our strategic plan that we're working from and that we prioritize our activities to needs to be updated. I think it's the collective wisdom of staff that it is time for an update.
That's a big job.
And the thinking behind that, and it may help explain why we structured this proposed agenda the way we did, is that when our last strategic plan was developed, it was the first year I was here, which is quite a few years ago now. It's going on its 14th year. And the county was coming out of a really disruptive period, and that period was the Great Recession of 2008. We felt the impacts really through 2010, 11. We were still even doing some elimination of positions and such when I came on, and there was a lot of uncertainty about how our community was going to recover, whether our economy would recover and look the same. And our strategic plan was developed within the context of coming out of that particular disruptive period. And I think it served the county well during that time. As everyone's aware, we're coming out of another disruptive period that's really changed kind of the socioeconomic and demographics of our community. And as such, probably is affecting how we think about priorities, or maybe should affect how we think about priorities as a county.
Talking about the pandemic.
The pandemic, yeah, coming out of the pandemic. Yeah.
Thank
you.
Election, or
well, there's a lot of things, right, that got compressed into that period. We had the pandemic. I think we had a lot of equity issues come up nationally during that time. We've had really significant economic shifts, and we've had political shifts. I mean, all of it has been kind of working in concert and impacting us. And so the way that we developed the agenda that I'm going to try and share with you, if I can find the right tab here in a second, is to first take a big step back and look at what information do we have right now to kind of understand what's happened. What is the socioeconomic statistics that we have in the county? What did our recent community survey tell us? What did our recent employee survey tell us? What are we seeing with our economic indicators? But taking a step back to kind of look at those various pieces and giving the board time to talk about, what does this mean? Has our story changed? Has our community needs changed? Just really big picture. Stepping back into some data, really, and some qualitative storytelling. What does that data mean for this community? What's it reflected? How is it reflected in what you're hearing out there in the community and what you think we need to be focused on now. And then going in to look at, what's still relevant in our strategic plan, what are the gaps, do we need to update it? Just having that conversation with the board, big picture, and then starting to drill down into some specific topics, starting with, hey, where are we at and what do we see as next steps with the big initiatives that we've got? Because we have not updated this board on what's happening with the jail now, what's happening, what's the latest with the airport, and starting to just rebase where are we, and these are our next steps, and these are the barriers and challenges we see. What else do we need to be thinking about? So that's kind of what we developed this agenda around. Let me see if I can share my
while
screen.
you're introduced that, John, we had a disruptive COVID period. I think also in the last 14 years, we've declared a climate emergency, and we've actually seen the effects of climate change come on faster than anticipated. And I think that plays a certain role in it. We have climate refugees here now coming to the high country, and we can anticipate more of that. After the pandemic has subsided. I still think we're going to see a lot of people who've decided to stick around because it's safer than being on a coastline, for instance. I heard a story about the Maine coast on the radio, where people who just bought in thinking they're going to go to a sleepy little town on the coast are now worried their property is going to wash away in the next storm. And you can anticipate Colorado's becoming more popular with people looking for stability and quality of life and all that.
See, and these are exactly the discussions, Greg, I think you all need to have as a board, and look at our guiding document right now and say, is it still relevant? Do we need to rethink it? We would then initiate a longer process, to try and bring that back just ahead of budget, probably June or such this year, and it'd be an iterative process. We can talk about that.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah. So in terms of getting to that discussion, we are meeting at the Mountain Chalet. I've forgotten the room name, but it's the one up on top. Yeah.
Conference room.
We'll have breakfast and lunch served. We're going to suggest just a little bit later starting time to give folks time to get in than we've had in years past. So starting at 9, going to 9:15, if that works for folks, just to gather and grab something to eat. 9:15, starting with just an overview of our time together, a reminder of the agenda, and going over some ground rules. I am anticipating, especially since it's next week, that I will be facilitating the conversation.
Default.
I think you should go out and look for somebody else. Put out an RFP.
Right, yeah.
For next year.
And then for next year, right. At 9:30, spend about an hour just letting the board step back and talk about, what are you proud of? What could have gone better? What were some key lessons, just to get the conversation started and set the tone. Then we'd go in with some staff presentations intermixed with discussion and questions to the board, like, what does this all mean? Really looking at demographic data highlights. We're not going to go through every chart and such, but we're trying to pick out probably 20, 25 pieces of data. It may end up being more by the time we're done, to really walk through and kind of understand, what does this tell us about what's happening in our community now.
Data.
It's going to be demographic, socioeconomic. We're going to pull some highlights from the citizen attitude survey, but we're also going to look internally. You have not seen the results of our employee survey yet, and so we want to highlight some of those so we can have that discussion. How ready are we for some of the things that we're taking on? Overall, it's good news across the board, but interesting. There are things for us to work on. So what we would do there is really, look at those highlights and intermix that with discussion about what does it mean. We'll look to have a working lunch and continue that discussion. These timelines, as you know, we try and be flexible because if the discussion is meaningful, we want to keep it going for a little bit. And then
Which staff are going to be there?
So it's going to be primarily admin staff, and so we'll have Levi. We've asked Levi to put together some of the data pieces, so we anticipate that he'll be presenting on some of that. We anticipate having Rich, Kara, and Ann. Melissa may not be there. She's dealing with a family issue at this point. And Laura just let me know that she'll be representing the attorney's office at the retreat. So we should have a good chunk of the organization
and don't
covered
forget,
there.
Ellen will be there.
Yes, we will. It will be open to the public. And we will have chairs for the public. But we're trying not to overwhelm the board. In the past, we've sometimes brought in all our department directors and such, but then it's like 20 staff members to 5 board members, and it doesn't feel like your retreat all of a sudden. So trying to have enough staff capacity there to allow you to ask questions and have in-depth conversations without kind of overwhelming the room.
I did want to ask about, I was just thinking about Ellen Sassano, who is the only one who has long range, I think, in their job title.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to drill down far enough to bring her in at all, just to add perspective, or is it something you guys think you can handle?
I think Kara will be able to cover that, in her role. She's kind of taken lead on that planning and resiliency side and has certainly dove in this last year.
Great.
So really after the data piece, it's really stepping back with that one-page document, our strategic plan, and just having a conversation with you, what's working, what's missing, what's no longer relevant here, to try and help us understand where you all are at, just big picture, with our strategic plan document, and answering that question about, do we want to engage in this longer term discussion about updating? Spoiler alert, I think staff across the board feels like it's time.
It's time.
Yeah. But it's really your way of helping us lead the organization, so we need to hear from you too, whether you feel the same. We would transition in the afternoon to review status and be able to give the board updates of some of the high priority projects. We understand these aren't all the priorities, right? But in terms of the initiatives where we've been spending a lot of public engagement time and money, we do have some, we've been moving forward with preparing submission of ALP, so we want to, on the airports, we want to highlight some of those conversations and talk about next steps in that process with you. Climate action projects have been a high priority. We are charging ahead, no pun intended, with electrification and microgrids and updating our climate action plans, and just want to update you and make sure we're on the right track there. Growth management, you all have been in those discussions. Some of these we may not need to spend as much time on, but clearly a lot of big next steps coming there over the next 12 to 18 months. Jail, we want to bring back some of the programming discussions. We did have our conversations with the judges to bring them on board, so we're ready to share the programming numbers that are coming out of the Sheriff's Department and have a discussion about next steps and how we want to approach that. There's been a request to continue talking about affordable housing, and next steps on the Phillips project. And you all may have others that are not on here, but we feel like these are the ones right now that we're putting a lot of time and energy. So we want to be sure we've got good alignment with the board and that these are still priorities. So it's a lot of backgrounding and a lot of context setting the first day. We will, kind of close and really pay attention to this last question. What do you definitely want to discuss tomorrow? Because you'll see, basically, we've left the second day a little bit unstructured so that we have time to be a little bit more free-flowing and take a deeper dive into areas of concern for the board. And so that may be choosing, hey, we need to take a deeper dive of 2 of these 5 initiatives, or what's not on this list that we need to talk about is the future of the workplace for Pickens County, an internal issue or something along those lines. But I want that to be a little bit more free-flowing and have you all have an opportunity to choose those priorities together. And we'll do our best to be prepared to facilitate and respond to those the second day. So that's our proposed agenda and our proposed structure. We are putting together, obviously we're doing a lot of work right now to try and put together it's going to be a fairly large presentation and data set for you on the demographics and such. The last thing, which we never finished last year, we had some difficulty getting everyone back to the table. I'll just say, but I do think we need to wrap up with finalizing our working agreements together. And so I do want to bring those back and wrap the retreat up with that.
Great, thanks, John.
So that's our proposal, and I guess, Greg, it's up to the board now whether this is how you want to spend your time or whether you want to redirect us to do something else here.
I like what I see. Of course, I want to add things to the others list on my
What do you
priority.
want to add?
The thing that popped into my head is transit and transportation. Just thinking about what the huge impacts that we're seeing from commuters, and I liked your comment about future of workplace, and that brings up, how are we going to craft a policy for subsidized housing going forward? That might be something we want a small thing really to tie up, but it's worth talking about. And I wrote working agreements also. But I like what I see, but I want to ask Kelly and Steve to weigh in, and Francie as well. France, they don't have their hands up. You go first.
Yeah, I like what you've presented. When you say strategic planning, you're not talking about the whole Venn diagram, that whole thing.
The whole thing.
Lordy gracious. Okay.
The whole thing.
It was so brilliant the first time around. And I really, really appreciate the way everybody who brings things to us runs it through that lens. It's just amazing what you've done, the way you brought that to the county, John. It's another sign of your incredible vision. But
thank you.
So I really, I'm so impressed with the way it's structured and everything, and it'll be interesting to hear whether there's ideas about tweaking it or whatever. It's pretty comprehensive, but I'll look forward to seeing what people say about that. So I like all of that. I agree. Transit is probably something that we should have on our list of things to talk about. And I'd also like to talk about the use of the backcountry and what we could do about that.
Great, thanks, Francie. And yeah, before I did say climate, just the climate lens, I think needs to be incorporated because it's here to stay. I'm going to go to Kelly first and then Steve.
Thank you. I'll probably jump around a little bit, but I'm actually going to offer a dissension about spending a whole lot of time talking about transportation, only because I feel like every time we venture into this space, we always say, well, we need to do this with EOTC at the table and RAFTA at the table. So I'm unclear as what we think we would accomplish as our body alone on this topic. So I would want more clarity about like how we would orient that conversation before I would want to spend a significant amount of time on it. So I'll throw that out there. Let me bring up my other things, and then Greg, you can sort of figure out how you want to respond to those. But so that's one thought on that. I am curious. I would really like to invite the sheriff in for this priority projects conversation, at least as it is relevant for the jail and housing. And he and I have met recently, and I think it would be great for our board to understand from his perspective, like his priorities. Because to me, it's not sort of clear how those two line up with each other from his point of view. And it would help us, I think, to have better conversations if we could hear from him. So I will make that request and see how that lands with you all. And then related to sort of rethinking strategic plan, one of the conflicts that I see that maybe begs visiting this, and I don't know how, John, you think about this in the context of revisiting a strategic plan, but I feel like we have a lot of tension between the sort of mandated services and the community priorities, which don't always line up. And that to me is where we sort of fall off a bit in our strategic plan and how we adhere to our strategic plan. So I would like some sort of consideration about incorporating that element into our discussion.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Is that it? I'm going to go to Steve next, then we can talk about all this. Thank you. Steve.
Okay, I'll bounce around a little bit also. In terms of transit, I would like to run an idea or a couple of ideas by you as a sounding board about changes to the RAFTA system. And I want to run it by you guys before trying to take it to Aspen City Council or to the EOTC to kind of figure out if, if this is a good idea worth exploring, or am I just too far out in left field on some of it, or, how it could be tweaked to be a better project. So that's why I would like to look at the transit things, just to look at the kind of big picture of a couple of things there. On housing, Greg and I are working on a list of potential affordable housing projects. And I would like to have that at least in a preliminary form to just run by all of you as in our housing discussion. Not that we have to act on any of them, but to just put the idea out there and be stimulating some thinking about how we could have different partners in different locations on projects. In terms of the strategic planning, to be totally honest with you, John, I never did totally understand the Venn diagram thing for the last 11 years.
No reason to start now.
I get the concept of it, but then I couldn't figure out how different departments picked what slot that they fit into. And to me, it's like the whole county working together on one big circle and not three separate circles of activity. So if we could make that simpler somehow or revisit it, I'd be glad to, but I'm not sure how much I'd be able to contribute to that discussion since I didn't understand the previous one all that well.
That's a great comment in itself, Steve. I really appreciate you saying that. maybe it'll help just to go back and look at what we're expected, the mandated services, Kelly points out, just to revisit that so we're all reminded, what the absolute baseline foundational expectation of us is. Thanks. Is that it for you?
And other than that, yeah, well, I like the agenda. I think I like the way it's set up. I think that'll be good discussions. Looking forward to it.
If I could, I was just going to say, since you both brought up transportation after I brought it up, my concern, I think RAFTA is a high-functioning organization and certainly will have something to say and participate in any conversation about transit and transportation. And I was thinking about big picture, 15 or 20 years down the road, or 30 even. But then regarding EOTC, I'm sure, I guess my confession is that I've always felt that the EOTC was almost a place where ideas go to die or don't ever really prosper, and the EOTC was convened as a requirement of a working agreement with CDOT, right? And I can't imagine a worse way to accomplish anything than to have every elected official there opining on it. And I'd rather send a delegate to EOTC, but I think that would violate the agreement.
As it stands.
But the thing is, that's why I really would love to have even if it doesn't go anywhere, to begin those long-term discussions, because I keep seeing EOTC get bogged down in the minutia, and then things just die. We've talked about the Highway 82 crossing at Buttermilk every year since I've been a commissioner, I think, and I still don't know where we are now.
Nowhere,
yeah. But I take your point, Kelly, thank you. And I think that having the sheriff attend for a bit and for a jail conversation would make some sense. Ideally, we'd have that teed up in advance. And thank you, Steve, for what you said too. So I think I can't think of anything right now, but I will as soon as we adjourn this meeting.
The one thing I did forget to mention on the second day I was going through too quickly is I am asking for a discussion too. Do we have the resources to move forward on everything? I think that's going to be an important conversation. That. Okay, I just want to be sure folks saw that.
I think we know the answer to that. What's the gap?
Yeah, well, we'll be able to present some of that, but I think there's got to be some prioritization of board energy on that, and so that will be right before the working agreements discussion.
While you're on that topic of resources, just thinking about what the demands are upon us with, the second homes that are all full now, and the new residents of our community who seem to be here for the long term. I'm assuming that trend is still ongoing. I'm sure some COVID refugees have gone back and vacated their houses, but it seems like there are an awful lot of new residents in the community, and they're making demands upon us, as we've seen. So that's a great conversation. Like, once again, are we even able to handle the mandated services required of us? Thank you. Anything else from anybody else?
All right. Well, thank you. I think we've got direction, and it's a lot for us to talk about.
Looking forward to it. I'm really excited to it, and it'll be great to be in the Mountain Chalet. They've got great views there.
I'm excited about
any requests for baked goods?
Baked good requests?
Ooh.
So just about the schedule. So then we normally would have a regular meeting that Wednesday, would we not? Or is it the first one?
No, that I think was an off week. We'd have a work. I think we're just missing a work session.
Okay, good. All right.
So Kelly, to get back to your more important question, I would say, things with so much air in them that you can eat as much as you want, and it doesn't add to your carbo load.
Like donuts.
I'll do my best.
Corn kicks, those kind of things.
Corn dogs.
Yeah,
Steve,
corn dogs. A lot of air in a corn dog.
I'll have to pass on your baked goods killing, I'm sorry to say, but no, I'm not sorry. I'm used to that routine now. I do look forward to being in the Mountain Chalet. This could be a good warm up to the next time I'm in the Mountain Chalet in March for the Liars Contest, where I will be one of the 3 judges.
Oh,
The what
I thought you were a contestant.
Liars? Like Liar?
Liar, yeah, Liars Contest.
Okay.
Fantastic.
So Chris Sweetley and Mayor Tory and I are the 3 judges who judge the tall tales that are told by different contestants.
Fantastic. That's a not to be missed.
It is a really fun event.
Are we bringing in any nationally known contestants?
Well, it's Mike Monroney and Nina Gabbianelli and Sylvia Wendro, and one other storyteller I can't recall right offhand. It is really a lot of fun.
Sounds great.
Put on by Jill Sheely's the organizer of it.
Great. Thanks for that. If that's all we need on the review, let's keep going here. Or you've got more. Do you have more, John? Because we ended that very quickly.
No, Sorry, Greg. I wanted to just leave time in case staff was way off the mark and how the board wanted to spend their time for us to have that conversation.
What did you imagine we might say?
I have no idea.
You know what? I'd like to propose. Why don't we talk about future agendas and just let it cogitate here, and then maybe we can circle back since we're ahead of schedule. If somebody has a big idea they want to share regarding the retreat, we can always pull that back up. Just let me know.
And I apologize. My board view is not working. Are you up at all?
I'd heard that the system went down while I was watching.
Oh, my electronic memory has gone down.
Really?
Which is a bummer. So I'll see if this comes back. I don't recall any specific future agenda notes. I would note for the board that I have agreed to moderate Great Books at the Aspen Institute, which is going to be the next 5 Wednesdays. So I'll be trying to get out of here. I may have somebody else covering.
We're going to adjourn early.
What time do they start?
I appreciate that.
Well, they don't start till 6, but I usually go over to prep at around 5. Try to be over there around 5. It's at the Institute. Yeah.
Great. Well, I certainly support you doing that. That's a great thing, and I know you enjoy it.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys giving me some room to do that. And I apologize. You don't see anything? Is yours open?
I went through them all, and I didn't see anything, but you might have things to add. Or
Navigate it differently, but I'll let you look at it and see if you see anything.
Let's see. We had. Were we going to talk somewhere in here about joint meeting with the city? It's not here on our agenda today.
I think we had that planned, and I did take over that time that was on our original future agendas to talk about the retreat. So, Greg, I think if you wanted to step back a little bit, I think you had a chance to visit with
Tori
the mayor, and
I could
there
share
are
that.
some ideas.
I shared that with you, didn't I?
Yeah,
okay.
I just saw it. Yeah.
All right. So there were concerns expressed at one point if it was time to have a joint meeting with the city, if it was appropriate, just out of consideration of everybody's schedule and how busy we all are. Is this the right time? And so I reached out to Tori and had a chat with him. I spoke to John Doyle as well, just on because we were in passing. And Tori said he queried his board and came up with 4 topics that he'd like to discuss. And I don't know, I think this is for a joint meeting. I don't want to mix it up with our retreat, which we just came off of. But one topic was mental health and wellness for the homeless population. The city's perceiving that to be growing. They're seeing a lot of homeless people on the streets, and they want to participate with us in a homeless response. And that I think that's useful information that whatever, and it may be with our homeless response we're thinking of for, is it for the Venezuelan or was this just homeless in general that
No,
came up on our end?
Yeah, we had a IGA that was proposed for joint funding of the services that are being provided in the Resiliency Center, as well as in our Schultz Health and Human Services building where we have the emergency shelter. It used to be the day center, but we're providing more case management services. So it's where folks can go to have a warm place, do laundry, get food. But now we also are connecting with case management services there.
I think that City Council would be very eager to talk to us about it, and Tori suggested that they do want to cooperate with us on that. So that's the first one. Second one was on transportation opportunities, looking at an airport redevelopment and the lumberyard in that immediate neighborhood, joint planning opportunities, including entrance to Aspen, Highway 82 improvements. He just said, does the county want to be more involved in our entrance to Aspen conversations? They want to work with CDOT as partners and probably need us as an ally in working with CDOT, and they hope CDOT will be an ally as well. That was his second one. Third is landfill, C&D waste, and diversion. The city's taking on their new composting program, their C&D waste diversion program. They want to make sure their strategy is aligned with ours. And I'm not sure they know entirely what we're doing along those lines, but Tori was very interested in hearing what we're up to and sharing what they're planning to do. And I did suggest that we have before that happens, they'd reach out and talk to our Kathy Hall and Brian perhaps, just to get on track so we see where the differences are and where the synchronicity is. The fourth one, housing. What Tori was saying is, with Ward and John as our rep and alternate to APSHA, they'd like to have a conversation about, are we doing the best we can regarding categories, rental rates, category caps for income caps. The concern about having to move out of your home if you're making too much money and the disincentive that might cause. So they'd like to weigh in with us, I guess, maybe outside maybe outside of an APSHA meeting, but they wanted to have a chat about that. They said they can work around us regarding meeting schedule. If we schedule a joint meeting, they'll do their best to show. So that's the news from my conversation with Tori. And there may be more because he was going to have a chat with his board and with his manager last night, and he texted me, but I haven't read his text yet. So nothing new on the text, but we're going to talk again this afternoon. Okay, that's it. That's what I have regarding a joint city-county meeting, and I'm sure our board probably has suggestions as well if we haven't already thrown those in the hopper. But I do think there's energy and value toward doing that sometime fairly soon.
I think it was originally planned for February 12th, so I'll double check that with Sarah.
Yeah.
We may not have time to put presentations together on all
That may be a
of
little
these
soon.
topics, but I know we'd be prepared to talk about the homeless services. I don't know the transportation. I know we've got an effort going at the airport that we could probably update on process, but I don't know if city staff would be ready on the other side.
One thing I wanted to ask my board, since you're here, and I see Kelly and Steve have their hands up, regarding what's happening with the airport. Of course, we want an update after your meeting with the FAA, but I'd like to propose that our board receive, even if it's 5 minutes long, and maybe we're already getting it, but I want to make sure we emphasize perhaps a weekly update, if not. If we haven't been doing that, just so we can stay abreast of airport activity. I think one reason was that just knowing what's happening out there regarding, condition of the runway, things like that, how things are going. A weekly update for this board, I think, on a topic that important is probably a worthwhile idea, and I want to ask the board if they agree. And I don't know if you want to answer that question, Steve, but I'll go to you first and then Kelly.
Let's see, just a second. Okay. I'm not muted, am I? Okay.
Yep, we hear you.
So, okay, I'm ready here. So for CCI, we just had the legislative meetings Thursday and Friday. So Kelly and I were there.
And
in
I was
person.
Hey, well done, Steve. Are you going to board reports?
Oh, what are you? Maybe I misunderstood.
I was
what you were
talking about a
saying, Greg.
possible joint meeting with the city. Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
Well,
we're going to get to the board reports in just a sec before you dive in on that.
Okay.
I don't know if there's
Sorry.
anything more to
Well,
talk to you about that.
I know that, Greg, you had shared your list with me, which seemed like more than enough for us to talk about in one meeting. That was 2 meetings worth.
Yep, agreed. We can trim it down. That's I just had what Tori had proposed. We talk about. Kelly, do you want to add anything?
I'll weigh in. I think it would be great if the city wanted to tell us how they'd like our collaboration related to the entrance to Aspen. I feel like we've sort of been waiting to hear from them about like where, their willingness as a board to want to collaborate with us and the areas of influence that they see as relevant. So if that is part of what Mayor Tory was suggesting, like I would be very open to hearing that from them, because I think we frankly have just sort of been like, it's the city's project. They have to figure out where they're at on it and then move forward from there, figuring out how we are a player and participant. Related to the APSHA stuff, I've seen Ward and John's input related to the distribution of rents in the categories and AMIs for the area and all that. And I'm happy to have a discussion about it. I want us to be a little thoughtful because, the APSHA board also has in its work plan to discuss, this and affordability and how we incorporate sort of broader affordability into our categories and rents. And so, are we trying to get our elected board positions aligned before hearing from APSHA on that? It seems a little bit of not, like if that's a topic that we want to set for a joint meeting between all 3 boards, that would be the sort of the more appropriate approach. And giving APSHA the opportunity to sort of do that work, because they'll bring relevant research and et cetera to that conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Francie, anything you want to?
No, I was fine with your suggestions.
Okay. The only other thing I would add regarding a joint meeting with the city is perhaps just a discussion about, how.
What?
Well, I'm trying to, with the joint meeting with the city, if we're going to, I'd love to talk to them about what their vision for the future of the community, the resort and the community and the cultural center, which we are so proud and have cultivated over so many decades. I'm concerned about it, and we hear a lot of doom and gloom in the paper from the pundits about, the way it used to be or the way it isn't anymore, and I'm concerned about that, and maybe there will be opportunities to speak to them individually, but what's the quality of life and the quality of the experience people have here, and how's that changing? That's maybe that we have that one over beers at the end of the day. I don't know, but that popped into my mind. I've been thinking about it a lot. John, you probably have more than you need there.
I don't know that we'll be able to do all those topics in one joint meeting.
We'll just skip
But,
to the beer and the.
I will check with, but if it's okay with the board, maybe we'll prioritize by where we think staff can be ready on this timeline. Like I said, I think we'd be prepared to talk about, kind of our current planning around homeless services and such.
I think the landfill discussion might be a pretty easy one also, but maybe not. You can decide.
I think we can brief on our end. I don't, it sounds like maybe they've got some policy work they want to do on their end. I'm not sure where they're at on that.
It may just be informing them about what we've already established. But I would encourage you to reach out to staff there or if you want me to, I'll talk
I've
to them.
already sent an email. Yep.
Great. Okay. Fantastic. So let's keep moving then. If we're done with that, let's go to let's go to department updates and board reports. Patty's not here. I don't have anything to ask that I would ask of her or for anybody, her surrogate, if there's anybody who knows about any of these topics. Francie, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't at the CCI meetings, but I was online. And the main thing I wanted to ask you guys about is the ban on slaughterhouses in Denver that Mike Johnston has proposed in Denver. And it's obviously not in our purview, but we have been asked to support opposition to that proposition by Mike Johnston. There's only one slaughterhouse in Denver. It's a lamb slaughterhouse, but it does chill the possibility of other slaughterhouses. And of course, there were some counties that jumped at the chance at buying up this slaughterhouse if it were banned, putting it in their county. We could definitely use a slaughterhouse on the western slope. But anyway, it is definitely I don't think it's intended this way, but it is in fact an anti-agriculture move by Mike Johnston. I think he's thinking not about agriculture in general, but just about it's weird to have a slaughterhouse in a city, which it's not because it's where they were initially anyway. So anyway, they're asking for support. I've already signed it as an individual, but they would love to have us send our signatures as a county to oppose the ban on slaughterhouses within Denver. So does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I'm looking to Steve and Kelly.
Yeah, definitely. I would support sending a letter opposing Denver's move on that. It's been really difficult in western Colorado with having those, one slaughter plant after the other, one burned down in Rifle where we used to take animals. Then we were taking them over to Delta. It's just like farther and farther away. So Denver, when I was growing up, was a big cow town. It's the best way to describe it now, looking back at what Denver was. Mm-hmm. And as part of their historical legacy was, major cattle shipping center, and they had slaughterhouses there. And to me, it's like sort of a xenophobia thing, like the metropolitan area ignoring all the rural and agricultural parts of the state. So I would like to put in my word of support for keeping the slaughterhouse in Denver and making it possible, possibly for others to be there too.
Thanks, Steve. So you're supporting the opposition, the letter of opposition. Yes. Kelly, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to sort of stay out of it. I don't know why Denver can't deal with this with their own zoning, but, without understanding whether this is impactful for our local agricultural economy, it's tough for me to weigh in on something so specific to another jurisdiction. I think we would probably be really offended if they did that to us.
I appreciate what you said. I think I agree with you. I guess I can assume I know what both sides of the argument are, but I don't know if I should be involved in it. And if anybody asked me to be, I probably would, demur from being involved.
I'll send you a link, Steve. Okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so
thanks.
then, other things, at CCI are mostly pending and not really coming up yet. I'm trying to remember, I don't have it open on my computer. I'm sorry, my computer didn't work all morning. So, let me move on and I'll come back to the rest of CCI. I'm gonna talk about CAST right now. So I went to the CAST conference with Levi and Cara, and we had a lot of fun. It was really fun to see all the different ski town people. But some of the things that came up, the most interesting one is this. So, I don't know if Levi told you about this. So, was it Crested Butte? Might have been Crested Butte or Breckenridge, I forget which one, did a study on using electricity for snow melt as compared to human shovels and trucks hauling it off and so on. So the town that did it hauls their snow a mile. I think it was Crested Butte. And they did a pretty intensive study of all of the carbon needed to run the trucks, snow blowers, whatever it takes to do it. And they came up with that it is 100 times more consumptive to use snow melt than to haul it off with trucks. So John and Ward and Tori and Levi and I were just like, and Cara were like, oh my God, that's incredible. I mean, if it were only 50 times, if it were only 2 times, it would be pretty remarkable result of a study. And so I don't think they're going to live and die on their study, but they definitely presented it, and it was interesting.
I wanted to share that in some meeting, the Public Works Director for Steamboat shared something very similar to that. I don't think, they didn't say 100 times, but they said it seemed that the actual energy consumption and use and carbon emissions were much greater from
Melting.
snow melt than it was from the guys getting out and shoveling.
And they did talk about all the different hassles of removing snow and, the piles up next to the sidewalks and all of that. But that was certainly the most shocking thing that came out of that meeting for everybody. I mean, it was also the most attended CAST meeting ever. 94 people were there. And they think that one of the reasons for that is that people used to send like one representative to a CAST meeting, and now they send like 5 or 6. Like, you have 5 people from Snowmass and 3 from us. And anyway.
It'd be interesting regarding that study. I'd encourage them, if you would, to, look for peer review of that and try to get confirmation.
Yeah, well, I think there were a lot of people sort of pushing for that because it was so shocking.
Thanks.
And then another thing, which was really interesting, I think this was also presented by Crested Butte, is that, so it was an argument against requiring electric ready rather than electric. Because if you require electric ready, you're putting in 2 systems. So you're putting in the gas system and using it, but asking them to be electric ready. So you're bringing in the amps, you're bringing in the wiring, all for electric ready, and you're really setting up 2 systems. So what's the point of that? That was one more thing they brought up. They talked quite a bit about geothermal, and Jonathan Godis was asking about geothermal, obviously, because they have so much in Glenwood, and he didn't know that Pagosa Springs has been heating their buildings. Well, I lived there 46 years ago, and all the downtown buildings were heated with geothermal. So he's going to try and get Glenwood to spend more time looking at it, and they mentioned Carbondale.
Great.
There's quite a bit of talk about keeping community character, and that all of the different CAST people who responded to the surveys, that was really important for them. So there was, housing, climate, community character were things that came up quite a bit. So Breckenridge has a more boots and bikes program, so that they're encouraging people to walk around and ride bikes rather than use their cars. And what was really shocking from Breckenridge is that 75% of their housing are STRs or vacation rentals, and they're mostly empty. They have 4,000 STR licenses over there. And then Clint presented from Snowmass, and he said that housing is their number one goal. And he also talked about, I thought this was interesting, and it does apply to ski towns for sure. They're trying to encourage locally owned and locally serving businesses. So they're actually doing some financial incentives to promote that concept, locally owned and locally serving. And there was a question of whether or not non-locally owned can serve locals, and yes, they can, if it's done right. And so, and they were saying that if it is locally owned and it serves the locals, that it promotes the idea of what's good for the local is also good for the tourist. Mountain Village presented on some of their affordable housing. They have a lot, and that what they're doing is selling affordable housing buildings to a business, and then the businesses rent out dorm-style housing to their employees. So that instead of the county or the city, as it turns out with Mountain Village, instead of the city trying to rent them or run it, they go into business with a business, and then the businesses rent it out. I thought that was really interesting. It's mostly dorm style, it's mostly for seasonal workers, it's for lift ops and those kind of people, not people with families. They're also building things for people with families, but and then some of these buildings that have this dorm style, or maybe another building next to it, part of the project, are 4-bedroom units that hold a whole flat. It's like a flat, so you own the whole flat. And these are tall buildings. They were very quick to say they're pretty tall. And Park City is doing something really interesting. I think they have 4 ski resorts associated with Park City. They're going to connect them all. Mm-hmm. They're working on connecting them all. It's really exciting. And they'll reduce so much traffic.
Anything with the gondola or
and and runs and stuff. Yeah, that was really cool. They talked about some Fleet Zero grants. I believe that was Crested Butte too. A lot of their fleet has already been turned over to electric, including some utility vehicles, a trash truck, big trash truck, and they also have a 1980s old farm truck that they're going to redo like you wanted to do with your little car. So they're going to try that and see how that goes. But mostly it's all new vehicles, and so they call them marshals over there, the police. So they have electric, and then they have the sort of like little vans that are all electric, and they talked about grants that are out there for fleet. They're called Fleet Zero grants, and they have a one-time due date, which is up to $500,000. But if it's under $50,000, they're rolling grants. And then they talked about legislation a little bit, and they talked about all the things that are coming out of House Bill 213. I'm sure most of us know about them, but there's one of them is the Strategic Growth Bill, and CML has a similar bill, and CAST has already given input to Dylan Roberts about that. So that's underway. They talked a little bit about the tax credit rebates, lodging taxes for STRs, and then the green lighted ones for CAST are, of course, the RET fee. And so I guess Velasco, Roberts, and McCluskey are the working group behind the RET fee. They also talked about a vacancy tax, which they're pushing for, and the STR tax authority, which CAST is exploring where that's going to go. And then they talked a little bit about multi-jurisdictional housing authority, and they've put that on hold. CAST has. It's not a priority for them. But then, this is the second most interesting thing that they talked about, Carbondale is going to independently establish a RET fee. They're just going to do it. And they know they're going to get sued, but they're going to need money to help defend themselves against it. And everybody there felt fairly strongly that they would win the suit. But they're tired of waiting for it to go through Congress, and they don't think it's going to, so they're just going to do it. Did you want to ask about that before I go on, Kelly? Okay, go ahead.
Do you mind if I just tag on with additional update?
Go ahead.
I only have two more things. Do you want me to finish first? Or do you want to go in right
Well,
here?
it's just specific to the rep.
Yeah,
fee.
go ahead.
Okay. So the governor has signaled that he will veto a rep fee bill, which is like incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
I'm drafting an op-ed related to a whole bunch of housing stuff, and one of them is going to be, I find it very ironic that the governor comes to our community yesterday to talk about housing tools, and then last week tells our local reps that he's going to veto their bill. That would be a useful tool to raise funding for housing.
Right.
So I'm super frustrated about that, but I guess no big surprise. I think there will be a request of our board to potentially contribute to a legal fund to support Carbondale if they enact this ordinance. It's anticipated it would go through the courts, similarly to how the Aspen bag fee went through the courts and was upheld. So I just wanted to, I guess, throw that out there to chew on. And there's no ask and no decision required now.
Okay. And then John Whitney was there from Bennett's office. And the main thing that he talked about a couple of things, but one of them was that the SHRED Act, which keeps the ski area money in from the United States Forest Service in the ski area is $27 million for recreation, is being held up by Joe Manchin. So it's not moving right now, thanks to Joe Manchin. And then they talked about the Forest Service and local governments getting together on housing projects. So of course they mentioned Aspen and Picking County. And there's a bill being introduced where the BLM could do the same thing. We don't have much BLM land, but some people do. I think that's it from CAST.
Right. I wanted to say, I think the experience with the electric vehicles that Crested Butte is having might be an appropriate one for Basalt to dig, and even Carbondale, as I've lobbied that Basalt's last mile commuter should be an electric vehicle, and they can't seem to figure that out yet. That's nice to hear Crested Butte's breaking ground on that.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. They had quite a few. So
it's a much smaller community than ours, and so.
Well, actually, it's not as much smaller. Oh no, never mind.
Crested
I was thinking of Gunnison.
Gunnison,
you're right.
Gunnison's a bigger town. Yeah, Crested Butte's pretty small, and so an electric vehicle running around Crested Butte's different than the situation we have here.
In the county, for sure.
For Basalt
the city,
or Carbondale, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd certainly support that. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Kelly and.
Hang on.
Oh, you've got more?
Yeah.
You're still on.
I'm still on. I've got to the thing I wanted to say about. You can come back to me though, but I wanted to. Yeah,
okay.
you can come back.
We'll
to
come
me
back.
while
Kelly,
I get
you
this
ready?
Organized better.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I will, related to APSHA, the APSHA board is recommending a change to our repair grant program. So it's been successful. About half of the money that was jointly contributed has been allocated for folks to do repairs to windows, hot water heaters, floors, things like that. They wanted to update the guidelines a bit, and it probably requires approval from this board related to expanding it to category 4. Folks, based on the cost of repairs that they're seeing applications come in for, the average cost is around $13,000. So that was a request that staff is making through the APSHA board. Since it's our money, it's important that our board sign off on it. And I wanted to sort of check in if we can do that informally, or do we think we need a presentation from APSHA staff on those, and there's on those updates. There's one more I'm forgetting, but I can come back and open discussion a little more organized with Ashley Pearl as well. So I need some input from this board on how we want to handle that.
Thanks, Kelly. I'll go around the circle. I'd say that I'd like to see a presentation on that before I just raise my hand, just only because I don't know enough. Francie or Steve, do you want to?
I thought we were planning a meeting pretty soon, Kelly, anyway. Ashley had written to you and me, and can we do it there?
Well, she asked two things. One related to a joint meeting with the city about the categories, and the other, how do we want to handle this conversation? So it's fine. If we want to schedule APSHA to come in front of us, that's fine. I think we have time on future agendas.
Yeah, it seems to me like having APSHA come present to us, present to city separately, maybe we then have a joint meeting with this. I don't know, we could do those two together. Have APSHA do one presentation at a joint meeting for us. That would take our whole joint meeting.
Well,
But
it
that
should
would
just be a minor, it's a minor update to a program that we already received a full, presentation on. So hopefully it won't take too long.
Just a brief update by APSHA at one of our meetings, and then have you and Ashley dig into it a little more and have the discussion. Sounds like a good plan to me.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Then, just a bunch of legislative stuff. So I'll run through pretty quickly, sort of like Francie did, related to some wildfire stuff. So there's some wildfire bills. Sorry, I'm looking for my notes here. Okay. CCI has supported a bill related to funding for some slash and burn, and also, or some slash collection, as well as greater authorities for government to deal with debris flows after an event. And there's another one related to community wildfire grant applications. These both have come out of the interim, or the wildfire commission, and are moving through the legislature. And I believe CCI is supporting both of those. The Jail Standards Commission, so they finished their work on jail standards in the fall, and now there's legislation requesting that the commission be dismantled and a different sort of ongoing group be created through the legislature. The bill also would allow for a variance process for local jails. The amendment that CCI wants to request is that they have to require a variance process for jails that can't meet the standards. John, I will just flag this because I don't know where our analysis about these new standards has overlapped with our consideration for our jail. But I do think we need to comb through that and pay attention.
Yeah, thanks,
The
Kelly.
standards themselves will not be codified into law, but they are finalized at this point. Let's see, there's a couple bills related to STR stuff that I think is relevant for us. There is a bill that basically the Airbnb and VRBO wrote that uses sort of ambiguous language, but there are concerns that it essentially undercuts any reporting requirements that jurisdictions can make. And, counties at CCI are concerned that this would undermine our requirements in licensing. because as you all know, we put requirements on the owner who has the license to report out like their tax receipts and their use and things like that. And this bill doesn't call people owners, it calls them facilitators and gets rid of any reporting obligations. So yeah, so that's problematic, and we're opposing that through CCI and CCAT. Another STR bill that came out of the interim property tax oversight committee or task oversight committee on tax policy is related to a different property tax rate for short-term rentals. Now that conversation has a lot in it about right now. The way it's drafted is that if someone short-term rents for 90 days, now their property is a commercial property, or is a lodging property, not a residential property. And there's a lot of concerns about how implementation. So the conversations about that approach are starting to move more towards creating scaffolding at the state level to allow for data collection and addressing assessors' implementation needs, to figure out like how would we properly record short-term rental use. There's a lot of sense of like, like, does it quack like a duck? Then it's a duck. That sometimes it's really obvious that a building is being used for commercial lodging, even though it's called a short-term rental, whereas there's a lot of gray area about when it's residential or not. And so we're stepping away a little bit from tackling, nailing the answer to that question down, and trying to create a landscape where we could easily implement something and have better stakeholding around figuring that question out. I was frankly shocked that CCI did not oppose this outright and instead has taken a position of amend, since the bill right now says regulate at 90 days. And the discussions about amending the bill are towards like, let's figure out how we would implement something like that. Politically, I think that the amendment approach is the right way to go at this point for sort of teeing up that ongoing conversation in future years. So that is relevant for that. Let's see, there is a bill that I think it would be interesting for us to think through or have Ann give us some input on. It's a CCI priority that would create authorities for counties to create a property tax exemption, essentially allowing a county to define a use that it wants to exempt or reduce or provide a credit or reduction or something, and that could be applied to all similarly situated properties. So, for example, if we wanted to give tax credits for affordable housing development for, a private owner or something like that, we could engage in that type of brainstorming. Sorry, I'm sort of running through notes here. Sadly, CCI did not support a bill that would give counties the authority to regulate flavored tobacco. It was quite the discussion about rights of owners to sell flavored tobacco rather than rights of counties to keep it out of kids' hands. So there, that's a little disappointing. There's also a bill that I think we might want to pay some attention to about the County Veteran Service Office and how the state portion funds that office for us. So there are some amendments being offered.
What specifically were they talking about, Kelly?
Oh, like moving towards hours, like paying for hours worked as opposed to like a percentage of a position. Which is tricky because frankly, many of our counties are supplementing a full-time position for these, for county veteran services officers. And how they would count those hours would reduce the overall contribution.
Great, thanks.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
And I think I will, let's see. Leave it at that for now. There's a lot of other stuff going on, but nothing that I think is earth shattering at this point. I think I brought up everything that is super. Oh, another one which sadly CCI did not support, but CCAT is supporting, is related to vulnerable users program that would add a fee on heavier weight vehicles in the 12 biggest metro counties that would then go towards road and safety improvements to protect pedestrians and multimodal road users. And CCI did not support that either. All right, I think
that's it.
Like a lot. There's a load more, but I think we should sort of figure out a better way to do our legislative reporting because there's so much, and maybe Levi can help us think through that a little bit. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. To you, Steve.
Okay, thank you. And I was going to bring up that the bill, they call it Vulnerable Road User Protection Enterprise, and they are limiting it to the 12 largest counties. And I said, is there any way that you could make it so counties, the other 52 counties, could opt into this if they chose to? And Eagle County, which is the 13th largest county, said they would be interested in that. But right now it's geared towards the 12 largest counties. Many of the accidents that kill pedestrians and bicyclists happen in the rural parts of the state where there aren't sidewalks, there aren't bike paths, the pedestrians and bicyclers tend to be on the roadways, and there's a whole lot of statistics across the country that a lot of the deaths occur on rural roads. But that's not what this bill is going towards. The other transportation bill had to do with the front range passenger train system. So that seems to be the impetus right now on the state, is for transportation things, are anything along the I-25 corridor in the big cities is what is important, and the rural parts of the state are, I think, being more neglected. One of the things that CCI did was to elect new chairs and vice chairs of each of the steering committees, which that wasn't earth-shattering. It wasn't as nearly as politically charged as it has been sometimes in past years at CCI, which I was glad. It was just like people were willing to serve in these positions, and it didn't seem to have a partisan bent to it like it has in the past. CC4CA, I haven't been to any meetings at this point, although I'm getting all of the material and, trying to navigate the landscape there and figuring out that there's lots of different opportunities for participating in things. Some of their meetings fall on a Tuesday afternoon during our work session time, so that's unfortunate. I had noticed that when Greg was our CC4CA representative, that there was overlap, and I will be at our commissioner meetings and not CC4CA unless there's something really, really urgent happening. The RTCC Regional Transportation Coordinating Committee, we are having our meeting, quarterly meeting on this Thursday. one of the things that we are working on is trying to broaden the scope of what the RTCC does. And Dana Wood, who is our newly hired staff person for RTCC, is also the newly hired staff person for the Intermountain TPR, which Brian Pettit is the chair of that. We're hoping we can have greater coordination between those two groups and have some coordinated efforts to improve transportation and infrastructure across our 6-county region for just making, improving things for transportation and for first and last mile access for disabled people and aging Coloradans and for veterans and whatnot. We're talking about having a regional transportation symposium. It would be a one-day thing with people coming from across the 6-county region. A lot of people from the different transit authorities, especially, to try to increase the coordination between the different bus systems to fill in the missing links. So right now, we're going to have a presentation this time about possibly extending the summit stage from Silverthorne to Kremling, which would tie together two of the areas of the region that aren't tied together right now. Let's see. Vintage is going to do, I think it's every other year that there has to be a scoring thing of all the applications from the various counties and senior centers for funding from Vintage. Vintage is our AAA. And so this year I will be the representative scoring the applications. And of course, nobody can score the applications from their own counties. So I have to recuse myself from those, but then I can score the applications for the ones from the other areas. So that is coming up. Club 20 is they're actually having a meeting in Denver, February 1st, just this Thursday. It's a meeting of Club 20 and I think it's called PW15. Oh, Pro 15, which is 15 counties in northeastern Colorado. So they'll be going to visit the legislature, and it's called Voices of Rural Colorado. I'm not participating in it, although it was intriguing. Would be right up my alley to have a rural areas getting together to work on problems of common interest. The Club 20 policy meetings winter policy meetings are coming up February 29th and March 1st, a 2-day thing in Grand Junction where I will be going to that to work on the policy discussions from the various committees. The various committees in Club 20 pretty much mirror what the legislative committees in CCI and in the state legislature. Senior council is really in need of new members. We've had 2 people, one person moved away, another resigned. We're making a concerted effort to have each person brings a potential new member to one of the senior council meetings. That group is really pretty active in advising Chad Federvich on the operations of the senior center and giving labor, helping out on the labor, like providing warm bodies for helping the staff to do different things throughout the year. So we're hoping we can get some more new members involved in that. People would get a free lunch at the senior center if they volunteer for that, and it's the best hidden secret in the county right now that the new chef there he's making some really delicious meals. I highly advise everybody to go and try the meals out. They're so tasty. He's a good chef. Let's see, the opioid settlement agreement committee is continuing having meetings every couple of months on the different areas of concern. So it's more down to the nitty gritty of implementing the spending of the money and providing services to the people with addiction problems who are needing help, and the communities in the various communities across our region. So that's all I have for today.
I just have two quick legislative.
Great, Steve, go ahead. Yeah, Francie, go ahead.
Okay, so the public lands had nothing except for their election. They didn't have any bills to talk about. The agricultural, wildlife, and rural affairs, their discussion was about a bill about noxious weeds, whether or not counties have the right to impose fines. I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to that because we have a pretty advanced noxious weeds program. So it was, I believe, it was an effort to ban counties from, no, that wasn't it. I'm not quite sure exactly. Anyway, but the land use had two. One is prohibits local governments from enacting or enforcing residential occupancy limits based on familial relationship status. It still allows for occupancy limits that are tied to minimum square footage for safety, health, and welfare. We're going to amend that so that it also includes being tied to septic and water. And then the other one was it prohibits local governments from installing or allowing the installation of new, this doesn't affect anything that's already out there, non-functional turf, artificial turf, or invasive plant species on commercial, institutional, or industrial property or a transportation corridor. It's mostly focused on the Denver metro area. And so there was just discussion about, well, if you leave the ground bare, that it has the reflective ability to create more heat, which is not good, and then in the end consumes more water. Somebody brought up planting indigenous wild grasses, which don't use as much water and then protect the ground from creating more heat. And I think our policy, the arguments against it, of course, were that it's taking the rights away from local governments. But several people spoke up in favor of it. They thought it was a good thing. So I think we ended up with amend. I think the recommendation was to amend, and I can't remember whether we are amending or following. What's that word for when you're following something?
Monitor.
Monitoring, thank you. Anyway, it didn't pass and it didn't get a post. So, and that's it for my committees.
There's a real good article in the Colorado Sun today about the turf bill and the different implications of it. The native grasses like buffalo grass actually would be allowed on these non-functional areas. They're not, it's not to try to prevent having nice green grass in the parks where people are using it, but it's just for the places where people don't go, just for places for looks, like
right,
on
non-functional
the highway medians and
yeah,
whatnot.
non-functional. Well, it wasn't written in that they could plant wild grasses, at least the way it was presented to us, but maybe it's been amended since then.
Yeah, it's worth reading that article. I learned a lot from that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm done with that.
Okay, that's it. All right, I'm going to launch in here. I'm probably not going to cover everything, but starting with core. On an interesting note, I got a note from Chris Caskey, who's working the Coal Basin project. And I had shared with him a new technology that uses ultraviolet light and chlorine to neutralize methane, just as an idea. Like hey, look what people are doing this is in feedlots and places like that, industrial farming areas. And while it wouldn't work at Coal Basin, he did share that there's a group that is going to examine the soils around the seeps in Coal Basin because they're discovering that there are methane-eating bacteria forming in certain areas of high methane production. And they want to come and see if there's methane-eating bacteria evolving in the ports coming out of Coal Basin. So the science is evolving, and it's kind of fascinating. I guess the thing I would share about CORE, first off, is that the CORE admin is reaching out to organizations like Protect Our Winters and the Aspen Skiing Company, Auden Schindler, and Jackie Francis and her climate mitigation programs. And they're reaching out to local like-minded climate action organizations, which we haven't always been in sync with or been aware of. So there's a lot of outreach so that everyone knows what everyone is doing. And I'm very proud of that because I made some introductions that I think are helping, because honestly, I think the ski companies' programs and Auden's work is aspirational in many ways, and CORE is actually doing the work. CORE is walking the talk when it comes down to doing the mitigation and the hard work with multifamily building, electrification, and trying to actually implement some of the policies that a lot of the others talk about. And the same goes with the climate mitigation project. So I'm hoping CORE comes up with something innovative and gets a grant, a Keeling Curve grant from Jackie Francis and her group one of these days, or at least they can show the results of their work, and it'll help her with her organization. CORE also met, I believe, this morning with Kara, and I'm not sure who else, maybe Michael Port, just to talk about grants that they see coming down the pipe, and is there any way CORE can help. Some of the grants are certainly ones that we'd be interested in at CORE, but they're only for municipalities or counties. So I think there was a conversation about that, and I don't have any more information on that. Regarding QQ, there's been a change in admin. Was it Claire Carroll? Is that her name? Left. And we have a new organization who I had it on my screen a minute ago. So there's been some staff turnover at QQ. Other than that, Kelly may have more on QQ than I, but I did want to say that at our next quarterly meeting, I'm wondering if we're going to be asked, maybe we won't be asked about our stance on the Shoshone purchase and all that, but if we were, I just want to make sure I or Kelly would know how to respond with QQ. So I'll query the board offline on that, I guess. Board of Health. The Board of Health has been asked and has proposed or been asked to do a series of op-eds, quarterly op-eds with the Aspen Daily News. The first one will be coming out in March. And the board discussed the priority topics. Number one topic is going to be on tobacco. So two of our Board of Health members will be co-authoring that op-ed on tobacco, and stay tuned for that, and we'll see one every quarter. Let's see, with RAFTA, what we've had most significantly with RAFTA is we've have the announcement of Dan Blankenship's retirement after 34 some years at RAFTA, and Kurt Ravenschlag is being selected as the new CEO of RAFTA. Kurt's been with RAFTA now for several years. I really enjoy working with Kurt, and I think he's going to do great. He came out of, I think, was it RTD in Denver? He was involved in working on that previously. Let's see what else on RAFTA. I walked by and looked at the new electrical charger at the Ruby Park, which is in place, and it looks like the contacts are in place. I don't know how soon it'll actually be providing electric charge to buses, but it was interesting to see the charging station that will do a quick charge on buses, and it's two massive electrodes on a tower that will come down and contact the top of the bus. But if you want to go get a permanent, you could just reach up with a couple of, umbrellas or something and maybe catch a buzz. Just kidding. I don't recommend that. We're slap happy, at least I am at the end of the day. I don't have anything from RWAPA right now. For me, it's been a little while. April and I've talked mostly about the Housing Coalition most recently, so I will circle back with her just regarding Lincoln Creek, because I want to make sure that RWAPA is engaged, at least paying attention, monitoring the Lincoln Creek issue with the mineral releases. And that's it. Workforce Investment Board, I've not heard from them, and not much going on from my end. That's it for me. And thank you. I guess I'm going to keep us moving. Ely is not here. We did speak with him this morning. It was great to see him. And I think we've got our update from John from this morning. Why don't we move to open discussion? And I'd look to John Peacock and Rich and Charlotte. Ooh, they're all here for this. And I guess that's wrapped up in that as an Airport Advisory Board resignation and Election Commission discussion. Hey, Rich.
Mr. Chairman, how are you?
Great. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. I apologize for my burnt-up face. Little spots all over it. I had a dermatologist appointment, so.
Can't even see
Yeah,
it.
yeah, you guys are very nice, very nice.
Oh, you can't see
Assaulted
it
by
in
a
his life, for
dermatologist.
real.
Yeah, that does happen.
You can't tell from afar, Rich.
Can't tell from right
There's
here.
that.
Scoot back.
He looks younger.
Yeah, I wished. They only did my face, Greg, so.
Okay, well, thank you. Airport Advisory Board, is that where we're going first?
Yes, and we have a resignation. Rick Heedy is resigning as of tomorrow, I believe.
No, it's actually effective after the meeting the
Okay.
last meeting in January there, so.
Okay.
But
And so we have alternate number 1, which is Michael Salons, and alternate number 2, which is Barry Vaughn. And in the past, you have, the board has always said they like to promote those alternates. So we're asking if you would approve Michael Salons moving into Rick Heedy's regular position. And then that would move Barry Vaughn into the alternate number 1 position and leave us an alternate position that we would need to advertise for.
Great, thank you. If I could, I just wanted to say that I did have a conversation with Rick Heedy, who he and his partner have bought a house in Sayulita. Maybe I shouldn't share that publicly, but they're spending the winters down there, and so he's just going to be offline, and I think that was his primary reason. He's just not going to be around as much. He had a great experience on the board. I think he was grateful to be part of it, and he's confident in the board and in the alternates. He told me that he was, no reservations. I think he has his own opinions, and he's concerned about the future of the airport and aviation and all the concerns we hear about all the time. But in general, I think he's very supportive of the Airport Advisory Board plans, what he reported to me this morning. So that's Rick's outgoing, and I'm hoping, can we give him a certificate, write a letter of, I really appreciate his involvement. I was so grateful that he agreed to come on that board, and I want to make sure everybody who's doing the heavy lifting on that board be appreciated and receive something from us and I'm sure we do that with anybody who goes off a board, but I wasn't sure when that would happen or what it would be.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. It was that was a tough one. I mean, the board really felt bad that he had to step down. We fully understand it, but he was instrumental in helping us with the RFP on this emissions program that we're doing. The good news is he says, hey, you can still kind of use me as a resource. He just felt And it's a credit to his, just the way that he views things, that he just couldn't be there enough to be able to support it. And his connection on the internet was really pretty challenging. So he felt it's better to step down. His term was almost up. And I think that's what we're asking, is for Michael to just step into that term and then continue on for the 3-year designation that Rick would have re-upped for. And it saves Michael from going through that process. He has been at almost all the meetings. He just hasn't been in a voting capacity. And I think it's been the practice of this board to move members into those. So, and the advisory board was good with that process moving forward. And Michael said he's willing to continue on.
Great.
So.
Rick had a choice between surfing and going to the AAB meetings.
He definitely picked the right one.
Thanks for that, Rich. I see Steve has his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say we need to talk to Michael and make sure that he wants to be the regular voting member. And it sounds like that's already been done, that he wants to do it. So that's a good way. I really like, promoting him and recruiting somebody for the second alternate position.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Steve. Francie, Kelly, anything you want to add?
I'm good.
If you don't need to, that's fine, but if you want to, you're good. Okay, I think that's fine. So that would move Barry into the first alternate. And I have to say, Barry is probably the highest profile person on that board at this point, because we see his letters to the paper, and Barry by nature is a fairly forceful and powerfully vocal person. Persuasive, I don't know. I was going to say persuasive. Well, he tries to be, and I have had people express their concern that he might be tilting the room a little bit, and I actually asked Rick what he thought about that, and he said he didn't really think so. But sure, some people tend to go on a little longer or speak a little louder, but he didn't think that was a problem. That was Rick Heady's perspective on that, and which I respect, and I'm not sure, I haven't spoken to anybody else on the board, but I did want to bring it up. I wonder, is there a concern if Barry continues writing letters to the editor? We just have to make sure he understands that he's not speaking on behalf of the AAB or the county with his opinion letters. And I just wanted to ask if anybody has anything else to add to that.
Well, I'm glad he's writing letters to the editor. Somebody needs to. Somebody needs to counteract the things that some other groups are putting in. That's interesting about that. I thought about that. I just wrote a letter, just the letter for the county newsletter, and it was actually, I shared it with our PR department. They did some grammar editing and made some suggestions. I shared it with John, and afterwards I thought, wow, that was really a kind of a group thing, and that's okay. But the process was I shared it in advance with the county, and I wouldn't be comfortable with Barry submitting something on the county or AAB's behalf without doing that, and I guess he doesn't have to, but there is the difference, as long as people understand what that is. I just want to make sure that line isn't crossed, and otherwise we have to come up with a different, if somebody from the AAB wants to write op-eds on behalf of the AAB, then we have a process for that, and I don't think I need to say anymore. Kelly?
Yeah, I think that the board are very intelligent, independently minded people. So I'm not terribly concerned that Barry is holding sway over the rest of those folks around the table in any, deleterious way or anything. I would just say that if the chairs start to feel that way, then it would be good for us to get alerted to that.
Great, thank you. So Rich and John are here, and Charlotte are here. They hear that. Anything else to add?
I could. We had a long conversation about it with the board, because they're individuals. Whenever they first came in, we said, you don't lose your individual freedom of speech. Because we've had this conversation with other members in there that wanted to just write letters, but we just made it clear that they can't write on behalf of the board. It's their individual thoughts. So honestly, I think the meetings are robust. I don't think he tilts the room. He definitely is vocal. Others, whenever they feel the need to step in, they do. So to Kelly's point, they're all very strong individuals. And Jackie and Meg, both of them do a great job of running the meetings. It doesn't get, to a point to where it's completely out of control, but they do allow a lot of conversations to take place and voices to be heard. So I think the process has been good, but we don't want to certainly throttle somebody's individuals, freedom to speak. And so we had a really good conversation about that. So.
That's good. I think that the public perception could be that he's speaking, since he's the only one they're hearing from, perhaps that might be an easy assumption to make.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to be aware of that, and perhaps Jackie and Meg will be on top of that too. I'm sure they are. Thank you. That's what do you need? A thumbs up from us for these two appointments, and then do we solicit for number 2?
Correct. And one more thing is that we are going to have our first renewal. Valerie Braun is up for renewal in April. And so I need to find out if the board wishes to do a renewal interview as they do with Open Space and Trails, Healthy Rivers and Streams, and a couple of other boards.
I also see Clint Kitty is on here, even though he's an appointee. Does that make a difference? And should we?
So the practice has been for the municipal representatives to be appointed by their entity. By their board, okay. Michael Solons, of course, is coming into alternate 1, because he's up at the same time. Rick's resigned. So Valerie is the one. I, for one, wouldn't mind hearing from Valerie. She's been there a long time, and I know she's often the voice, the minority report. So I would like to hear something from her. Maybe we should invite her in. But I want to see what Kelly and Steve and Francie think.
Well, I'm wondering if Michael gets a new term when he moves up. Does he just start over again?
Yeah,
with a
that's
new
what we're
term?
asking. Instead of putting him back through it, he just steps into that term.
Okay, just making sure about that.
Yeah.
Steve's not there. Kelly, what do you think?
No, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with him taking over the term. That usually is what happens. It makes sense to me.
And then what about Valerie? Do you feel any reason to Valerie's, I assume she's re-upping, right? She's not going away.
I hope so. She's good for the board. Yeah.
Do you feel a need to talk to her, check in with her, or?
Well, I mean, I want all of our board members to feel like they have access to us as they would like to. Valerie has always, I thought, has passed her thoughts along, I feel like, to the board. So I guess I'm just unclear as to what you want to accomplish by asking her to come alone to a public forum in front of our board.
Well, I just think that it's an opportunity if somebody's term has expired and they're re-upping and coming back in to sign up again, it's a check-in, and it's specifically about that term and that individual. I would welcome it, but if nobody else is interested, I can easily pass. I'd love to hear Steve's opinion, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. I would welcome it. I don't want her to feel like we've summoned her, because of some concern, because I'm glad Valerie is there.
Maybe there's a policy on if a term turns over, do we interview people? We re-interview people, don't we? Isn't that a normal policy?
You do for Healthy Rivers and Streams and Open Space and Trails, and there's one other one I can't think of.
But that's the policy. Okay,
Right.
well then I'm going to say let's stick to the policy would be my call.
Well, there'll be 3 of them.
If we want to
Well, not
interview Michael as he steps into
it. So it'd be Clint and
Yeah, but that's why I brought Clint up. The municipality.
Valerie. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I see. We wouldn't have to worry about the municipality. Okay.
Okay. Steve is on the phone.
I'm not going to get in the way of that. That's fine.
Hey, Steve, we got a question for you. Our policy, Steve, is, as Charlotte points out, for several of our boards, is to re-interview people as their term comes up for a new term. Valerie Braun is up for a new term on the AAB. Are you okay with interviewing her, or would you not think it's necessary? Sorry, I'm throwing you in the deep end.
I think, no, I think we should have the interview. The interview can serve more than one purpose of us interviewing her, but she can give us feedback from her experiences on the board, and I think that would be valuable. And that's a good opportunity to have a two-way conversation.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. I agree with that, and I think Kelly's okay with it, and I think you have enough board direction there. Okay, can we move on to, thanks, Rich. Election Commission, and I see Ingrid is in the room.
Here's that if you need it.
Oh, yeah, I do. I have this.
Do you
Thank you
all
guys for
need
sending us the bylaws.
copies? Do you all have the copies?
Oh, can I
of the
have that?
bylaws?
I'd like to. Excuse me, get out of my chair.
There you go, and there's one for Francie or something.
Hard copy if you want it.
No, thanks. Don't need it.
And I did send those electronically.
Right. Yeah.
Earlier today for Stephen Kelly. So we came to you previously and you expressed some concerns about the bylaws and asked for some time to discuss possible revisions. And Ingrid's here with me, so we will let you ask the questions.
I'd like to start a question, because somebody in the community asked me this, about, what is the time commitment? And I assume it's focused around the election, but maybe there's more to it than that.
Normally, it's one meeting a year. We didn't have a quorum until August of last year, so you have the minutes from that. And I sent out an email because normally it's the beginning of February. So I sent out an email because we only have the 3 members explaining why we're on hold and that you all are looking at the bylaws. So we will do it as soon as is convenient between elections and we have more members.
Got it.
And we actually have an applicant that I am scheduling.
A new applicant?
Yes.
Okay. Great. And we don't have a time for that yet, but that's
February 13th.
great. Look forward to meeting them. Questions, comments?
I'm surprised we got one. I didn't think we would. It's great.
Kelly?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think that this has been a tricky board to appoint someone to, because I know for me, I'm like trying to strike a balance between someone who knows a thing or two about our election system and, is not trying to wreak havoc on it in any way. As well as someone who is not interested in being an election judge, right? Because that's where we've kind of fallen into those two camps of like people being like, oh, I want to continue as a judge, so I'm going to withdraw, or, oh, this person just does not have any frame of reference of this world of elections that we're asking them to engage on. So I guess I would just, I'd love to hear from you, Ingrid, about if you have any advice of like criteria that maybe we should think about when we're looking to appoint someone to this board. I've raised concerns about the bylaws because maybe they're just outdated. There's just no, that board's decision stands, right? And it's if there's not good people on that board, then to me, that's a little scary. So I just don't know if there's perhaps some other guardrails about the function of the board that maybe we want to consider, or some references to the interaction with state law and how, where that prevails, or something. So those have been my concerns as we try to figure out how to support your office.
And I really appreciate that because it is sort of this quasi judicial if something should happen. So, and it should be nonpartisan really, because that's no place for it. So that's a little bit tricky. And I think my job is to keep them as informed as I can, so that they know what our operations are like. So if something comes up, that they have the background to be able to digest it and understand what's going on. But I agree with everything you said. You just said too. So.
I just had a question regarding number of members. When does it become dysfunctional? Is 4 members too few, or is 3 members too few? Is there a statutory rule on the minimum number that we can have to be functional? And are we out of compliance already?
Well, what is in the bylaws is 4 as a quorum. So that's why we had 4 people when I had the meeting, but then Brooke Peterson moved to Garfield County, so.
Oh.
So that put us back to 3
Got it.
now. And I know Brooke felt like unaffiliateds were the best to be on the board to keep from sticky stuff.
Right. I agree. Okay. I don't have proposed changes or suggestions. I'm grateful that we have somebody coming in. What do you need from us today?
Well, if you all want to bring it back, or, look at the bylaws and suggest any changes, or work with us at some point to make those changes, then, we're open to that.
Yeah,
Right. John.
it was a request of the board to bring the bylaws back for review. I think for some of the, Kelly, I believe that was your request, if I remember correctly, for some of the reasons that you've brought up, and whether there was going to be any direction from the board to pursue any language or bylaw changes, I think is the ask.
I'm going to ask Kelly to make her proposals then regarding changes, because I feel underwater on this. I don't know enough about it to opine on it, and I'll open it up to the rest of the board as well if anybody else wants to weigh in. Steve, if you have a comment, or Francie, but I guess I want to hear Kelly's elaborate a little bit more on what she was thinking and what she'd like us to see us do. But I'll go to Steve
If I
first.
could jump in real quickly, I had thought that it was a requirement that there be equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans, but it says that's not a requirement. I just looked in the bylaws that as much as possible, you want to have people of different political parties, and then that would go for unaffiliated also, would fit into that category of having a variety of people. But it's not a quota system of set number of R's and D's on there, for instance.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah. Okay, Kelly, the floor is yours.
Well, honestly, I don't feel like I was the only one who had concerns here when we brought this up. And I had circulated in the past red lines to the bylaws, which I don't have in front of me right at this moment for our consideration. I would look to Ingrid to see where she sees weaknesses and being able to support the execution of the voting process. For me, I think that there at least needs to be some sort of like recall provision of this board for members or some sort of period of review of a decision should we get into a position where, a commission does something just crazy and we have some sort of guardrail so that either those members get recalled or another board can revisit that decision. I'm just concerned about just the nature of the politics that we live in now in a presidential year, that if we're appointing people who don't know a whole lot about elections, who we don't know very well, and there's no guardrails in our bylaws.
Great.
So
Thank
that's,
you.
where I feel like there's gaps.
Right. Section 5 on membership, just that a member may be removed from the commission for good cause only, comma, by vote of the BoCC after recommendation for or against is made by the commission. Does that need to be changed? The wording on that need to be changed, or is that satisfactory? It sounds like that would satisfy your concern. I guess that's a recall. Removed from the commission, same thing, I guess. That seems pretty clear to me, but maybe it needs to be tweaked. I don't hear anybody chiming in, so Ingrid, did you have anything else?
Well, I like what Kelly is saying, because, it's great to have it there, have the commission there informed to, sort of, it goes both ways. It can protect the county, whatever, but Kelly's right. If you get somebody going rogue, it could be a problem.
Do we need to put some sort of time frame on that, like on removal from membership of that board? Does it need to be something we can expedite, or it sounds like it's there to me?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if the process is too slow, or is there some mechanism we should think about? I appreciate what Kelly's saying about changing circumstances and what seems like a lot of pressure and controversy with elections. Thankfully not in our county lately, but we certainly want to be vigilant. If there's some change we need to add, and I'm sorry, Kelly, I don't have your red line in front of me.
Yeah.
Do you want to, can we table this? Does this have a deadline that we need to meet? And I'll go to Steve, who has his hand up. If it's not urgent right now, we can always come back to this. I'd rather come back to it as soon as I understand fully what the proposals to change are. But Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I had been under the understanding that if someone is an election judge, that they could not be on this board, but I don't see that in the bylaws.
I don't think it's there either.
And is there a state law regarding that, Ingrid?
Not that I know of, because most of this comes right out of home rule. So I'd have to go back and look again, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it seems like that's a fertile ground for finding people who would want to be on the election commission, would be people who have been election judges and are interested in the process and are knowledgeable about it. And I always thought that they couldn't if it was one or the other. And I think we kind of indicated that to people when we were interviewing them, as I remember.
I think what happened is one of the party chairs pushed that forward and didn't think that it was appropriate. So whether they were an ex-party chair or an election judge, I believe. I don't think I saw that letter, but yeah.
And is this about serving concurrently as a judge and on the commission, or is this just about having a history of being a judge?
I think concurrently, but I wouldn't swear to it, but that was my understanding.
I would entertain having a rule that would not allow concurrent, that makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we need to insert in this.
Yeah.
We're having trouble recruiting people already. I don't want to make it harder, but I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good suggestion if that's where it's going.
Yeah, well, and I think Kelly's right. I mean, we still have a appeal to the Supreme Court on the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling. And if, depending on how that could come back, that could create all kinds of unhappiness. And if we get too partisan on the board, that could kind of disrupt rather than help.
Well, Greg, I think that we should, I mean, I'd like to make a paper copy of this for me and get out the red ink and start, try to tear it apart a little. But if Kelly, if you could tell us the date when you did the red line thing, I probably have it in my computer, but I think if we just spend a little bit of time looking at it and then revisit it, the
I'll dig it up.
proposed changes.
I saw advice from John Ely as well on this, and I'll forward it.
Great, thanks.
Okay,
Thanks,
thanks.
Kelly. I think we should come back to this. I'd be more comfortable, and sorry, Ingrid and Charlotte, but I think we made progress today. John?
So I would suggest setting it as a regular agenda item. And Kelly, I was trying to see if I got a copy of the red line. I'm not.
I didn't see it in there.
But I think if we include that in the working materials, then we can have a more robust conversation.
Great, thank you. We'll do that. We'll get it on the agenda, and we'll progress onward through the fog, as you say.
Yeah.
I think that's all we have for the days. Right? Are you anything else, Charlotte, Ingrid?
If that's
Okay.
it, we'll get the
They're done.
new applicant in here.
Yeah, and we'll see a new applicant on the 13th. I think unless there's any other business to conduct, I'm going to say that I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all, and thank you, Grassroots. I think we're done.
Thank you, Greg.